Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for a meeting of the Tulare County Board of Supervisors. We will begin today's meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. That will be followed by a moment of silence. We will be led today by Supervisor Valero.
Please join me in saluting our nation's flag. Ready? Pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated. Item number 1 on today's agenda is Board of Supervisors matters, and today I will begin with Supervisor Joaquin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Here, it's been a busy couple of weeks since we did not meet last week. Besides, of course, fielding quite a few constituent calls and whatnot, checking in on the fires. Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee meeting, Animal Services Advisory Committee meeting. I do want to touch on, I had a CSAC Board of Directors meeting, and on that we went over a few propositions, whether to support or oppose, so I just want to go over those real quick so the rest of the board is aware. Proposition 16, the recommendation was to support this measure. It prohibits the state of California, including counties and other local governments, from discriminating or granting preferential treatment to or any individual on the basis of race, sex, color, ethnicity, national origin in the operation of public employment, public education, or public contracting. There were enough votes to go ahead and support that measure. The next was Proposition 17, which is elections, disqualifications of elections, and Prop 17 would amend the California Constitution to remove 2 clauses that prevent those from parole for a felony conviction from voting. This would restore the right to vote to those convicted of felonies when they have finished serving their term of confinement to prison. The Policy Committee recommended a support measure that did not receive enough votes to support that measure from CSAC, so we will not be supporting that. Well, we will not make a statement on that. The other was Proposition 18, which is would allow 17-year-olds who are going to be 18 years old for the next general election to be able to vote at 17 in the primary. That was recommended support. That did not receive enough votes for CSAC to support or make statement on that proposition. And then the last one was Proposition 19, home protection for seniors, severely disabled families, and victims of wildfire or natural disaster. Again, that was recommended to oppose, and that did not receive enough votes. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Joaquin and Supervisor Valero.
Well, good morning, Tulare County. Yes, it has definitely been a challenging few weeks, but we are mustering through all the changes happening around us. Never did we surmise that we'd be going through so many of these challenges from different angles. But I am confident that even while riding the waves, we can remain steadfast, focused, and forward. Leadership is hard, and yes, especially during this time, yet I wouldn't change it for the world. On Wednesday, September 2nd, the county partnered with organizations like Dinuba Kiwanis, Dinuba Chamber, and local nonprofits and businesses to provide a small business mask distribution event. As some businesses open up shop, we want to make sure businesses are provided with the resources needed to be effective in their reopening strategy. I also got the opportunity to attend the 9/11 memorial ceremony at the Fire Sheriff Headquarters, and then made my way to the Republican Assembly community event at Martha's Vineyard. The Sheriff's Office and Fire Department put on these great remembrance ceremonies to reflect on the tragedy that impacted our nation. As was mentioned at the ceremonies, those of us who remember this major incident can point to what we were doing and where we were at that morning. I also participated in the Law Library Board of Trustees meeting yesterday afternoon. In addition to budget approvals and director's reports, we spent a good amount of time discussing our reopening strategy. Ann Bernardo is doing an amazing job of trying to reflect the county's public library system, and that we don't deviate from that public library system as well. Yet at this point, we as the board decided that we have asked Ann to come up with a plan that will include appointment visits, given that attorneys and the general public want access to material found in the law library. I was also on a call with AT&T leadership yesterday, along with my colleague, Supervisor Crocker. This meeting allowed us to express some of our concerns with broadband in our area, in addition to learning about the resources being provided in our rural unincorporated areas through AT&T. Thank you to Mike Washam and Julieta Martinez for scheduling this meeting for us. And on the agenda for this week, I have a meeting with Paul Saldana to discuss resources for small businesses through the Valley Business Connect. I will also participate in the Dinuba Government Affairs Committee meeting hosted by the Dinuba Chamber of Commerce. The following day, I will participate in the Kings River East GSA and participate in the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act meeting with the Department of Water Resources. DWR will provide an overview presentation of the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, the current status of where the state and local groundwater sustainability agencies are with regard to SGMA implementation, and the important nexus between groundwater management and land use decisions that are relevant to county representatives. We also have a countywide oversight board meeting at 9 a.m. on Friday. And then on Saturday, I will be participating in FoodLink's Cooking Around Tulare County, showcasing delicious pumpkin empanadas. I then have a Zoom call with the newest cohort of the Central Valley Latino Leadership Academy, and I'm also looking forward to our TCAG meeting on Monday. And that is all I have, Chairman.
All right, thank you. Supervisor Crocker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let's see, since our last meeting, just to highlight a few items, is San Joaquin Valley Insurance Authority met, and we took up a position to have no rate increases for Tulare County for our employees, and so I think that's very positive considering that Fresno County was getting a rate increase. I've also had a couple of Rcrc executive committee meetings, and we're going to be having those on a more frequent basis as we go through the process of hiring a new president and CEO for that association. We did hire a firm out of Washington, D.C., who specializes in trade association recruitments. So they've done quite a bit. They have a California presence as well as being nationwide, and that's beginning in earnest. So we have tentatively another meeting scheduled tomorrow to go over some of the expectations of the executive committee for that search firm. Also attended a meeting of the Mineral King Cabin Owners Association, providing updates on some of their concerns regarding road conditions and the bridge going into Mineral King, and that was a couple of weeks ago. Upcoming as Rcrc tomorrow, I have a full board meeting for Rcrc followed by executive committee meeting. In the regular board meeting, one of the main things we're going to be talking about is Prop 22. Prop 22 is the proposition that is looking at repealing portions of AB 5, which requires independent contractors to no longer be independent contractors, to be employees, and those companies have to provide health care benefits like they would for any full-time employees. But that's a specific carve-out for ride sharing. So unfortunately, it doesn't look at any other industries except ride sharing. But that we'll be looking at that and discussing that to see whether or not to take a position on that. Thursday, the San Joaquin Valley Air Pollution Control District will have a board meeting. Good news there. We'll be accepting a grant from the federal government. It'll be our largest grant in this arena from the feds to help with additional tractor replacement programs as well as orchard sweepers. So when there's nut harvesting, whether it's pistachios, almonds, walnuts, and there's sweepers that are going through the orchards, that creates a lot of particulate matter, a lot of dust. You guys may have done that or noticed that, and there's newer equipment that produces a lot less dust. And so we started a program a couple of years ago that was really out of a need to just try and prevent some of the larger particulate matter to get out in the area. It's been very successful, and farmers love it, and the program's had a tremendous amount of success, and the equipment's just as good, if not better, than the older equipment. And that's always our goal, is we're not replacing one piece of equipment with a worse piece. We want something that's more efficient, that's going to help on numerous sides, not just from an air quality standpoint. And this Monday, we have TCAG and TCTA meeting, and one great piece of information that happened last week was we were awarded a $16 million grant, a build grant from the federal government, the Trump administration. This is something that we've been working on for over 2 years, and it really began out of a discussion with folks in the White House about what their priorities were for infrastructure plan, and they really emphasized a desire to have public-private partnerships. And this project is a public-private partnership. When we've gone to DC last year, we took a contingency that included local farmers that would be impacted by this in a positive way. We also included individuals from the International Agri Center who are supportive of it. Both of those entities, the FARIAs and the International Agri Center, put up funds to begin the environmental process and have agreed to donate portions of the right-of-way. And so it's a true public-private partnership where that's going to be a tremendous asset to have a new interchange on 99 in a place that's already congested, and help movement of traffic and create a lot of future jobs. And lastly, as already stated, but I think it deserves re-emphasizing, I can't say enough about all the firefighters that are out there doing their job, protecting our communities. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, Supervisor Townsend.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. Just to report on some of the things going on over the last little bit. On the 3rd, we had our East Thule Groundwater Sustainability Agency meeting, and as we have for the last couple of meetings, it's mostly been honing in on the rules and regulations on implementation. So we've kind of circled back through each of the committees. I think we're going back through for the 3rd time now to make sure that all of the committees have seen all of the comments and have been included in the updates of the rules and regs. And so on the next meeting, we actually implemented it already, the rules and regulations, but on the next we'll be updating that with the comments. So everybody's had a lot of really good participation in putting that document together. And of course, on the 7th, we all celebrated Labor Day by not doing anything. So made sure to post on Facebook about where it came from, and that essentially today that we're just looking at honoring all workers on that day. And so because there is honor in every bit of work that we do, and every job that people have. Every job is an essential job that people have, and so everyone needs to be honored for the hard work that they do. On the 8th, after a pretty long time of going downhill, my mother passed away. And I just want to mention that to say that she was such a huge impact in my life and in the life of all of my siblings, and a very big influence on making us believe that we could do whatever we wanted to do. And so I just wanted to posthumously, I was able to thank her many times over her life, and so she knew from all of the children how appreciated she was. But a wonderful woman, and she passed away. So just want to honor her by stating that this morning. And I know exactly where she is. There's no doubt in my mind that she's sitting in heaven right now, enjoying her reward. So on the 9th, completely the opposite of heaven, we had a retirement pension ad hoc meeting and talked about the future of that, and a lot of really good, along with Chair Vanderpool. I was there my first time on that ad hoc committee, so I was learning a lot about how that works. A lot of good ideas being tossed around there about what to do and what to consider for the future. On the 10th, the Success Reservoir Enlargement Project, I was invited by the Corps of Engineers to come up to the site of the project where they're raising the spillway approximately 10 feet so they can elevate the storage behind the dam. And so I did a video with the Army Corps just discussing that and what that will mean, the benefits for the people downstream, all of the valley, the water storage that we desperately need in the area when we do have those good years. And also, of course, the flood control that it will provide. There has been a time, even in my lifetime, when the spillway was breached by floodwaters coming down and doing some pretty significant damage in the east side of Porterville. Also on the 10th, with the San Joaquin Valley Regional Policy Council, we had our first day. It would have been a trip to Washington had it not been for the shutdowns and COVID. So we had a Zoom call with many of our representatives at the federal level on the 10th, and it's called Valley Voice, and so that was the Valley Voice Day 1. I was not supposed to have a speaking part, but one of the others on the committee had to leave early, and so I ended up taking several of the calls on discussing goods movement and water storage in our valley. And as Supervisor Crocker mentioned on that call, we learned, I think I saw his post, and also we learned it from the first person that we talked to, that we had been awarded that $16 million build grant for 99 there in Tulare. And so also there was a $20 million award as well for the Diamond Grade Interchange up in Stockton. So two of the things that we were lobbying for on those calls actually had happened that morning just before we started the call. And so it was kind of nice, instead of having our hand out, and as we typically do when you're doing lobbying, but to be able to say thank you for your support of those build grants. So that's an exciting thing, as Supervisor Crocker mentioned. Then also, as has been mentioned on 9/11, a few ceremonies that day. Tulare County Fire, Tulare County Sheriff had a wonderful ceremony over in their parking lot, and a great time to remember all those that paid that ultimate sacrifice, and also to honor those that are continuing to put themselves in harm's way for us today. Later that evening, later that day, the California Republican Assembly had the ceremony there at Mary's Vineyard, so I was able to attend that one. Also, another great ceremony. The singing of God Bless America was particularly touching, remembering 9/11, whenever Republicans and Democrats and independents all stood on the nation's Capitol and sang that song together. And I had to wonder a little bit out loud whether we would do that today with the divisions that we're seeing. But I would trust that we would, but I don't have the confidence that I had before in that. But it was a beautiful time. And later that evening, I also said the opening prayer for a ceremony that was for some city council candidates, but also a 9/11 ceremony as well. And on the 14th, Habitat for Humanity over in Porterville, the Building Hope in Porterville Committee, and we're planning on another doing another project now, so just looking for a site as we continue to raise funds. And then also, as has been mentioned many times, the fires. Actually, my wife and I live right on the boundary line of the evacuation in Springville, right there below the Springville barn. So above us is evacuation, and where we are is voluntary right now, so it's extremely smoky. We have seen, nothing but firefighters going back and forth up the hill, heavy equipment, planes flying over. Chief Norman standing in the back there, just want to give him some special thanks because I don't know if he's slept at all for the past several weeks, but he's been in constant contact and just really doing a fantastic job. Thank you, Chief Norman, for all that you're doing up there. There have been some significant losses, which he will talk about, but I just know that it could be so much worse if we didn't have all those brave men and women working on that fire. And I was particularly disgusted to hear from our governor talking about how this is all due to climate change. So if you just stopped driving your cars, we wouldn't have these fires. What it's due to is a lack of forest management over many, many years, and not being able to get in and not being able to mechanically thin, to log, to do some prescribed burning, the things that all the people that know forest health would tell you to do, has not been done for many years. Because we went totally the wrong way on trying to protect these forests. And now what we're doing is we're losing them. And we have several, even giant sequoias threatened right now, and some are probably damaged. So anyway, we need to change that. I hope that this will be a time that we will be able to turn that around. And some of the things that this board has lobbied for since before I was on it, and since I've been on it, we've lobbied for forest management at the state and federal level. So I hope that those things begin to be heard at this point. We will be having another call on the 16th with the Valley Voice. It'll be the day 2, and the 17th will be day 3. On the 18th, I'm going to go out to Poplar and visit the resource center that they've been making some improvements on, and we're doing some donations for out there, and also participate in a food distribution for some of the farm workers out there. And as has been said, the 21st, TCAG, Tulare County Association of Governments, and then Tulare County Transit Authority, TCTA, will be meeting. And sorry for the long one, but that's all I have.
That was pretty long. Supervisor Joaquin.
Yeah, I just, in my wanting to get all those propositions in, I know a lot has been mentioned about the fires and the brave firemen and fire ladies, women. But Sunday and yesterday, I spent a couple hours at our Emergency Operations Center at headquarters, and I want to give a big shout out to those folks who were sitting there handling all the logistics, making sure equipment is getting out, that the proper information is getting out to folks. So our staff has just been doing an incredible job. So thank you to the staff also.
All right, thank you, Supervisor Joaquin. So a few things. Obviously, number one, I do want to reiterate the comments. The 9/11 ceremonies were very well done throughout the county, and I do want to thank our county fire chief and county sheriff for putting together a great commemoration of a tragic event in our history. And again, it reminds us that we have to be so grateful and thankful, appreciative of the work that is done by the men and women in the first responding sector of our world. They do a wonderful job. Currently up in our own backyard, we've got over 800 firefighters fighting the fire, and that cost is over $27 million, and according to the fire department, that fire could have been stopped at 4 trees from a lightning strike by the U.S. Forest Service that had identified the fire very early on after the lightning had struck, but it was supposed to just burn out, and now over 100,000 acres is burned, and so have $27 million. So clearly, like Supervisor Townsend mentioned, we have to change our approach in how we manage, or actually these fires are because of a lack of management in our forests. Also did want to reiterate the build grant that was received in the city of Tulare for the Commercial Avenue interchange. A lot of work went into lobbying for that grant, and to get $16 million from the federal government, and to have that be a reward for our efforts, and also for the private partnership and the donation of all the right-of-way and the effort of the International Agri Center to get that project done is truly to be appreciated and recognized. Sad to say, bad news did come yesterday. The 2021 World Ag Expo has been canceled. That's very sad to hear. That is such a significant event for not just the International Ag Center, but for hotels, for restaurants, for all sectors of our economy. It's just tragic. They can celebrate the Commercial Avenue interchange, but with an empty show this year, and that's, in my opinion, tragic, but had to be done when deposits are being made and traveling plans are being made by all of these companies and visitors from throughout the world to come to Tulare County each 3 days in February. That's happened every year for the last 50+ years. Very, very sad. So just have to pass along my sadness to hear that it is canceled, but also do recognize the position the International Agri Center Board was put in with the uncertainty of this pandemic and the government's response to it. And given all of that, I think they made a very difficult but right choice. Moving along, yesterday had a Greater Kuia Groundwater Sustainability Agency meeting. That meeting went very well. We are getting closer to setting the fees for the groundwater sustainability planning going forward, and it looks to be right at $10 an acre, and will target parcels that are 4 acres in size or greater going forward. And the vote will be based on that, and will be scaled based on the size of the parcel. The State of the City event will take place for the State of the City of Tulare this Friday, 9/18, so September 18th at 11:30 a.m. This is completely via Zoom. Very unique way to present the state of the county or give an update about the county to the City of Tulare, but looking forward to that event. This Saturday, September 19th at 10 a.m. at the Tulare Fairgrounds. Every year, I believe for the last 3 or 4, the Tulare Chamber of Commerce and the fair have collaborated to put on a Quilt of Honor event, which recognizes local veterans, each with a handmade quilt, thanking them for their service. It's always a very moving event and is very well attended. It's going to be different this year, but I have been asked to MC the event, so it is taking place. On Monday, we do have a Tulare County Association of Governments meeting, as has been mentioned. It is right here in these chambers, and it will take place at 1 p.m. And then the last item that I wanted to address during my Board of Supervisors matters, using my prerogative as chair of the board, I want to present a little bit of recognition to a member of the audience who is here today. She is so bashful we couldn't get her to sit up here on the dais with us, even though it's her name on the dais, and it's her position still, unless she's retired and already moved to Florida. I don't know, Deanne. But Deanne Peterson was appointed to the County Council for the County of Tulare on March 24th, 2017. She has been with Tulare County for approximately 21.5 years. She was hired as a deputy county council in June of 1997. 7th grade was a great year for me too, Deanne. And rose to the rank of chief deputy for the labor and employment team in 2008. In 2015, Deanne left Tulare County to become the assistant county council at the County of Merced. She made an excellent choice and returned to Tulare County in 2017. Deanne is a former president of the Tulare County Bar Association, and she received her Juris Doctorate degree from New York Law School. I don't know about New York schools, but congratulations nonetheless, Deanne, on receiving your degree from there. And you know, it's really been a privilege and an honor to work with you over the many years that I have. You were in the county council's office back in 2009 when I first got elected to the board, and I got to deal with you through a lot of closed sessions and a lot of different interactions over the years. And now as county council, you're our go-to legal counsel, and you've done a wonderful job. 3 years, 3.5 years as the county council is definitely something to be commended. It is not Kathleen Bales Lang's 62 years in the county council's chair. I don't know, I don't even remember what it was, but I just know it was a really long time. But we do appreciate all of your above and beyond guidance, both personal advice and guidance to protect Tulare County from any of the dangers and perils that we may find ourselves in. And we do definitely want to recognize you in your retirement, wish you the best. I know you're moving to a great state where there's a lot of sun and warm temperatures, and definitely should bode you very well in your retirement. So with that, it is my honor to present to you this plaque and county seal. If you want to come forward, Deanne, I'd love to have you make some probably unprepared remarks, but as this is a little bit of a surprise. Plane travel is these days, so you might get a couple of dents in your nice plaque. So with that, it's my pleasure to present to you the highest honor that the County of Tulare can bestow upon a county employee, the Great Seal of the County of Tulare. So thank you for your many years of service, Deanne.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
This has really caught me off guard. I can't believe Jennifer would betray me this way. I didn't want this because obviously it's very emotional. But I thank you so much for the opportunities that you've given me, and I really appreciate it, and I wish you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you, Deanne.
I'd like to share also, Deanne, you've become a good friend, both professionally and personally, and I appreciate what I always feel is competent, sound advice. So thank you, and it's a well-deserved retirement, and let's keep in touch. Thank you.
Supervisor Valero, you want to make some remarks?
Yes, I also want to thank Deanne. I know that although I only knew you for just a short 1.5 years, you helped me navigate the county experience, and you really have been there to push and provide the resources needed to be effective in my position, and so thank you so much for doing that.
All right, Supervisor Townsend.
Dan, congratulations, and thank you. I remember the first day that I met you and the folder that you gave me that's about that thick and said, this is all you need to know about navigating the legal system through the county. So I did read the first page, so thanks for that. No, but I appreciate that. Appreciate all of your service to the county over the years, and wish you the best in your new adventure. Thanks.
All right, Supervisor Crocker.
And I appreciate your ability to have a can-do attitude with the department. You always took things very seriously and was able to bring that group together to provide the needs of our customers, whether it was us here on the board, other departments, and you brought even though you had a tremendous amount of experience with county council, there was still a degree of freshness that I felt that there was an energy that I felt you brought to the board and to that position, and I could see that, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, well, not bad for an unagendized presentation for you, Deanne, but congratulations, and wish you nothing but the best in your retirement, and may the best years of your life be ahead of you. Yeah, it might be. It might be. Okay, so now we're going to move on to item 2, which is a request to receive an update from the Health and Human Services Agency on COVID-19 status and response efforts in Tulare County.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board, CEO Council, Tim Lutz, Health and Human Services. My update's fairly short today, in part because there isn't a whole bunch to report, and also sitting in the EOC wasn't as easy in finalizing my report as I had hoped yesterday. So double duty sometimes is a little challenging. So first, before I go into my presentation, we actually wanted to show two of the marketing projects or films that are going out, or I should say ads for our Mask Up film project. That project is going to businesses throughout Tulare County to kind of feature those leaders, what they're doing in response to COVID, and again, those positive types of messages. Today we have a video from Stafford Chocolates and also Galaxy Theaters. So hoping this works like we want it to.
I'm Rob Taylor from Stafford's Chocolates in Porterville. I know you don't like wearing masks. You know what? Neither do I. But the folks here at Stafford's, we miss you, and we want you back sitting at our tables. So please, wear your mask, wash your hands, keep a safe social distance, and stay home if you're sick. Do it for your friends, do it for your family, do it for the people you love, do it for yourself. Do it for Tulare County.
And then our second video is from Galaxy Theaters.
I'm Freddie Gonzalez, General Manager of the Galaxy Theater in Tulare. And I know you might not like temporarily wearing a mask or socially distancing. I didn't either at first. But the team here at Galaxy misses you. So please, wear a mask, keep a social distance of 6 feet from others, and if you're sick, stay home. Do it for us, do it for your friends, and let's get Tulare County open.
So those are just two of quite a number of different videos that our community outreach team has been working with area businesses on. I'm very appreciative of all of the businesses that have agreed to the campaign. It's nice to see a lot of our local leaders talking about masks, COVID, and us working to get through this pandemic together. So going on to my normal report, the last 2 weeks we continue to see the positive directions that we want to see in our key metrics. Our cases today are at 15,361. That's up 1,056 from the last report, but that also reflects 2 weeks with the break in the board meeting. And then we are at 253 deaths, unfortunately. That's an additional 19 from our last report. And then our recoveries, 14,657. So looking at where our case rate and our weekly case rate numbers are going, that's where we really do see that, that clear decline. We're down 38.4% from last week. We did have a little bump last week, more or less where it was the prior week, but definitely saw a sizable decrease for this last week. That puts our case levels to where we were seeing in mid-June and continues to highlight our positive trending. Significantly too, the case rate, that daily case rate per 100,000, we're showing now at 12.5 per 100,000 of the population. That compared to where we were at last week at 17.5 and before that in the 26 range, all very positive, bringing us below that 14 per 100,000 threshold for schools where we were looking to get. And as a note on that, 7 per 100,000 is where we want to get to the next tier within the framework. So that would be when we get to the red tier level.
And Tim, real quick before you leave that, what was the governor's guidance before he changed here recently? I mean, we would have met the required metric had the guidance not changed from the watch list to the non-watch list, and now being in a tiered approach, correct?
Well, it depends on which
Metric
month
you
we're
use.
talking about and which way it's been changed. More recently, the 200 is still pretty consistent with the 14. It's just taking it, on a daily case rate versus a 14-day case rate. So roughly, it's about the same. It is a little different. Certainly, it's longer between moving in those tiers and slows down progress where a county, if they make significant progress and are even into that orange or yellow tiers, they still have to go to the red tier before they can then move down to that less restrictive tier. So that definitely slows down and spreads out the response period.
So how far out are we from the time frame that school waivers will actually be granted outside of the allowance for pre-K through 2?
So we, based on now meeting that 14, what we're hoping to do then is see next week to make sure that this trend holds, which then next week would be 2 weeks from when those initial ones were approved.
Okay.
And so they would be able to move to TK through 6th grade.
For the waivers that have been
That's
applied.
correct. They would still need to have a waiver. We have to get below 7 and then be below 7 for 14 days before all schools could open more broadly.
Okay, great, thank you.
You said TK through 2nd or TK through 6th?
So TK
Okay.
through 6th is the maximum allowable by the state for the waivers. On the conditional basis, before we were at that 14, we have been approving the TK through 2nd grade. So that's where the delineation is. And then our testing positivity also definitely showing improvements, hoping that trend stays as well. Week ending 9/5, we were at 8.7% on our lagged positivity. The threshold for the next tier is 8%. So if that trend holds, we are getting closer to being able to get into that red zone. And then our testing rate, that is to say, our volume is how many tests per 100,000 in the population. I'll explain why it's relevant that we're looking at that metric in a moment, but we're at 212.3 per 100,000. For comparison purposes, the statewide average is 216 per 100,000. So we're basically right there at this point in the state average. We do continue to see that decrease in volume that I had been talking about the last few times I come here, that we're also seeing statewide in terms of that decrease. So overall, that trending does show the progress we want to see. That case rate, as I noted, is at that below that 14 per 100K threshold for the TK through 6th grade. Our testing positivity is good. We are really looking closely for where our cases go mid to end of next week, because that's when we would expect, if we're going to start to see a bump from Memorial Day weekend, see it there. I apologize, Labor Day weekend. As I said that, I thought to myself, wait.
May again.
Yes. And then hospitalizations, also very positive note on that side. We're at 46, which is a 24.5% decrease from my last report. Again, continuing to see hospitalization levels where we saw roughly mid-June. So talking briefly on state activity, there have been a few things that either are in process or that were implemented. Last week, there was some modifications to the county monitoring list, or the blueprint for a safer economy. What the state introduced and implemented was an adjustment process for the case rate. And this one, unfortunately, I'll try not to overcomplicate it, because it's somewhat complicated and frustrating, because it means our case rate isn't always exactly what we're calculating. So what the state's attempting to do is add a weight to a county's testing volume. So that that number that I gave you of the tests per 100,000 is relevant because for counties that are testing below the state average, they're actually creating a multiplier to adjust the case rate up. And so when you look at how far they'll go, will go up to 1.4 of an adjustment, so a 40% adjustment up on that case rate. We've been around, I think the first week we were 0.085. I think this week we were 0.004. So we're right there at that average level, but we watch that closely. This adjustment only applies to counties that are more than 100,000 in population. Obviously, a number of counties have voiced concerns about this. My understanding too is that CSAC has also been engaged with discussions at some point with Health and Human Services at the state level. And mostly our concerns being, we're feeling a lot of this are factors that are outside of our immediate control. We can bring in the testing sites, we can prop those up, but when the state guidelines are limiting testing of asymptomatic individuals, that limits what we can do in terms of volume. Additionally, commercial labs, as we well know, when they became overwhelmed, were holding back supplying reagents to collection sites, again, completely outside of our local control. And then we also know there have been some instances on some reagents, like the Abbott reagents, where the federal government has diverted some of those shipments for other states or for stockpile. And then what we're tracking moving forward, we have some forthcoming guidance on another item that's going to become a complication is the equity measure that has been talked about widely when this new blueprint for a safer economy was introduced. From our discussions with Department of Public Health, it sounds like the state's pretty close in rolling out what that's going to look like. We're expecting the governor to announce it. Doesn't sound like today, but sometime this week, as early as tomorrow. And what this is going to do is measure based on what's called the Healthy Places Index, and that Healthy Places Index will then be divided into 4 quadrants based on the census tracts. The disparity that they calculate then would be the difference between your highest and lowest quadrant that is divided on the Healthy Places Index. The counties then will be expected to decrease the test positivity difference. So they're looking at what's the testing positivity for your highest quadrant, lowest quadrant, what that difference is. And counties are expected to close that testing positivity difference by 10% within 6 weeks. The challenge then becomes if a county does not decrease that within the 6-week period, they are not able to move down to the next least restrictive tier within the framework. This information is preliminary in terms of, I know there have been a lot of discussions. Again, my understanding is CSAC also has been working with California Health and Human Services on these metrics.
Yeah, and as a matter of fact, at our CSAC meeting, Zoom meeting, Dr. Galley and Health and Human Services Secretary and the Governor's Cabinet Secretary, Ana Mata Santos, was Zoomed in and took questions, and they got an earful. So
yeah, I'm sure they did. Yes, and I know certainly this also will apply to counties with a population of 100,000, again, based on limited census data for those smaller counties. So that's been another concern and criticism of this metric is it's not applied uniformly across the state. So we're expecting that, and then the state is also going to be releasing some guidance on gatherings. The concept here is looking at less restrictive guidance for gatherings of members that are not from the same household. It's generally geared towards smaller gatherings as opposed to large-scale events, but also reflective of kind of the season that we're coming up on, some of the challenges of a long-term picture on COVID, and the realistic nature of being able to avoid gatherings entirely for a year's time or more. And then quick highlights. Porterville Alternative Care Site is officially closed at this point. The last patient was discharged this weekend. They are in a ready status where they could open within 72 hours if the situation arises. Equipment did stay on site, so that will make it faster for reopening if need be. And then for remdesivir, as of Friday, Kuia Delta had treated 245 patients. They have 959 vials on hand. CRView, 109 patients, 380 vials in stock. So we did not accept this week's allocation due to carrying inventory at our hospitals. And then our testing sites, we've had a lot of activity on trying to work with the state on some additional mobile testing. I wish I had more information, but honestly, it's been difficult to pin things down, and it kind of shifts on us every time we think we have a firm idea. But we do know we are getting a Verily, which is the state's mobile testing site that should be now opening Friday at the Woodlake Memorial Building. That'll be in the morning. It is more restrictive because it does not test children. So that's a key limitation of those Verily sites. And then we're also working with the state on two Emergency Medical Services Authority, or Msa, testing sites. Our hope is to get more information on this. We've been trying hard to get it pinned down. We're looking at getting two of those sites and targeting the Citrus Belt, looking in the Strathmore, Lindsay, Exeter area, kind of along that corridor, recognizing where we continue to have gaps in our testing services. And then on the schools, I had mentioned that we have been approving the provisional waivers. We have 6 that have already been approved for TK through 2nd, and a number of others that are in the review process that either we've sent back for modifications or we just received them. Our understanding in talking to Office of Education is that we should be expecting a number of public school waiver applications coming in the coming weeks.
Would you just go over that real quick, Tim? The
Sure.
number of schools that have submitted waivers. I'm hoping that number has been increasing.
I was kind of surprised when I asked for the update on it, but we kind of had the influx early on. We only have a recent one, the Sausalito School in Terabella, that is our most recent one that came in, and we're in the initial review phase. All of the others, I think, were on the list last time, which was CRView Junior Academy, CVC, Outside Creek, and Valley Life Charter. Those are the only additional ones that we've received at this point.
Okay.
I apologize, I should have counted that. Yes, that's what I'm getting. And then again, now that we're seeing that 14, we're wanting to see next week to go ahead and pull the trigger on the full approval of the waivers for the TK through 6th grade.
Great. Yeah, sure, go ahead.
So does that mean that you'll have to submit their waivers, or will it be a blanket cover for all?
They still have to submit the waiver. We have to get below the 7, and we have to be below that 7 for 14 days, and that one's a hard rule by the state on you have to be below that 7 for 14 days.
Well, see, and so I'll just share that, because I have actually sent the waiver form to all of the superintendents within my district area. Is there anything that the county can do in terms of being more proactive in this approach for our waivers for our schools?
So we have worked with Tim Heyer. We've had a couple meetings with him as he does, I believe now weekly meetings with school superintendents. We know that it was discussed with superintendents and that information was provided. We continue to make ourselves available as a technical resource if schools need more one-on-one support. We have our schools team that will absolutely work with them if we know there's a need, and if there's somebody that really does need that support, please let me know. We'll be sure to connect with them. And then our costs to date, $7,462,000. We are going to see that increase more quickly now because that's starting to reflect CARES Act dollars, that as those get spent, it's encompassed under the overall incident. So I know we jumped from that 3 million to 5 million to 7 million. It's not because we've suddenly massively ramped up staffing or our spending side. It's that we're starting to see all those CARES Act expenses coming through. And then lastly, just an update on Healthy Harvest. The state onboarding call took place yesterday. Proteus is finalizing the details for food and transportation components. The state will be putting out a press release, which I believe the board chair had a chance to contribute to, as well as our Community Care Coalition chairs, CSET and Proteus. And our anticipated go live is the 17th, so this Thursday. And quick note, Dr. Hott, although she normally is listening, she's actually on the Zoom this morning. Specifically, if the board had any questions for Dr. Hott in addition to myself, and again, just wanting to make sure that she is available. She normally does always listen unless she has a conflict, but also important that the board be able to ask questions.
Okay, great. Thank you. Supervisor Townsend, you've been waiting very patiently.
All right, thank you, Tim. Appreciate that. And yeah, for you and Dr. Hott, if she's listening in on the line. So the anticipation is the 11 waivers will be approved next week, should numbers hold.
The 6 waivers would definitely be approved next week. The others would be really dependent on if we get the information back that the team has asked those schools to provide. But yes, if they have all the information in their waiver, they would be approved at the full TK to 6th.
Okay, thanks for that. And then I had one question that came in regarding the cohorts. We as a county had added sort of a limit of 100 to that. I had one question about whether that could be removed or adjusted if they could maintain the cohort sizes, if that could be adjusted up to maybe 200.
It wasn't it something about the 25% of school population as well?
Yeah.
And that was the challenge when we introduced the 100 was we were trying to reflect the very smalls, that it was actually to their advantage if a school had more than or less than 400 students, really, that they could do the less restrictive. So the 25% would then apply from the state guidance. That is a general guidance. Certainly if there are schools that you'd like us, or that they know they're asking that question on the cohort, we can look at their situation and at least weigh in and review that. I think all of the guidance needs to be continually looked at through the lens of what we're seeing and what's happening.
Right. So specifically, CBC reached out on that because they think that they can do, they think that they can get everyone in the cohorts if we would bump that upper limit.
Is that all that you have?
That was it. Thank you.
Okay.
I don't know, Dr. Hott, if you wanted to add anything to that response.
Oh, yes, I guess it depends on the 25% that guidance from the state that's the limit for schools, so total population in cohorts.
So I guess the question was if it's 25% and we said or 100, whichever is greater, and then we did that in order to aid some of the smaller schools. But the question was if they could say 25% up to 200, if they could do that on the size of campus they have. That was for you, Dr. Hott, sorry.
Yes, I'm trying to envision what you're saying. So, yes, we are also reviewing, we have their application for waivers, so I'm not clear which path they're taking and how they're planning to combine that. So,
well, let's just say there were 200 students just for the math, and we've said 25% up to 100, so they could only do half. But if we said 25% up to 200, and they had the facility to do it, the size of the facility and the scheduling that they could do it in cohorts, that's what they're asking if that would be acceptable, because that could help them get their whole school going.
I might.
Yeah, so we'll go ahead, Tim.
Oh, no, I was just going to say I might suggest, because I know I was kind of wondering the same thing that Dr. Hott asked, which was I know we've been working with them on a waiver and then the cohort, so it might be worth just us touching base with them to understand what they're requesting and get better information on that piece.
Yeah, I think that'd be helpful, sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Is that it, Supervisor? Okay, Supervisor Valero?
Thank you, Tim, for that presentation. I wanted to go back to the Community Care Coalition. And I know that you've been doing a good job at bringing in all kind of entities together to support several communities. One of the questions that I have for you, would it be possible, because I know that it takes a while to get from like Early Mart and then to other communities that are listed on the schedule, but would it be possible to kind of break apart some of these things and use them elsewhere? Like I know, for example, in these community care events, you have the waters, you have the resources, you have the testing, so there's a lot of segments at play there. But could you potentially, so that way other communities don't have to wait, can you then look at kind of putting a piece of that in a different community, so that way, again, there isn't a lengthy wait from getting to community to community?
I think that's an excellent point, one that I know that the team kind of recognized of. The goal with the Community Care Coalition obviously was provide as many resources as we can in one space, but you're right, you lose some nimbleness in that and some ability for if it's a food distribution, if it's a supplies distribution, and the team is looking at doing those more independently and discreetly that aren't necessarily going to always be tied to a test collection type of event. So I think you'll see some forward progress in that, and I know the team is listening. We'll make sure to start to incorporate that into the future reports on what we're putting together.
All right, Supervisor Crocker?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to go back to schools a little bit. So are we governing the cohorts, or I didn't think we were. So that's something, if a school decides to go the cohort method or route, then they have the state guidelines that are in place, or whatever the states come out with, and that's what they're supposed to be utilizing, and we've said we're more or less hands-off. So I think what I'm hearing is that there's confusion by schools as far as what we're supposed to be approving versus what they can approve, because it sounds like with what Supervisor Townsend brought up, if they can already adhere to the cohort and, recognizing that they're also possibly going through the waiver process, schools, I think, ultimately are just looking for a path to provide education to their young people. And so whether it's labeled as a cohort or whether it's labeled as a waiver or whatever, I think they don't really care. And so if we can provide that type of direction and guidance and say, this is what this means, and these are the options, and this is the process for that, this is what, waivers look like, have some type of, flow chart that we can provide and say, here's multiple options, a decision tree or whatever, that people can say, okay, this makes more sense. We're going to go this route because we have ample space, et cetera, whatever the case may be. I think that would be helpful because I do sense that there's a lot of confusion. I mean, in my speaking with school districts, it is unfortunate that more schools haven't applied for the waiver, but I think that there's still a lot of this hesitancy. And I think that kind of goes to the point of, providing some type of template. I brought this up before for schools to use as far as the waiver. I know that it's going to be very specific to each school site, but if there's even just some type of guidance that can help encourage schools to begin that process or to give them some surety that they think, okay, I can actually fill out this waiver. It's not going to be overly onerous. It's something that county staff can help and assist in the process. They can help me out with it and walk me through this, and it's something that is going to be a worthwhile endeavor. I think that's important. I know we've approved waivers for K through 2, and we're waiting on expanding the 3 through 6 grade. So can you explain a little bit more as far as why that's the case? Because I know our metrics show that we've reached that under 14 threshold for all K6. I know you touched on it, but can you just explain that a little more? I'm having difficulty understanding that.
Yeah, Dr. Hott, do you want to provide input on that piece?
Oh, sure. Is the K through 2, we needed to evaluate the impact of that, which I think we'll be able to do in another week. And it also required to have the sustained or stable rate under 14. So we have 1 week, 1 episode of the rate being improved, which is really very heartening. But we want to get the rate next week to make sure it's stable, and then that we'll present the information to the state to go expand to up to the 6th grade for all the classes that have the waivers.
So for clarification, the looking for a stable rate, is that a state rule as far as the waiver process, or is that kind of our own internal metric?
Well, it's sort of a combination. Yeah.
Okay, so the state's saying that they want to see some consistency, and we want to make sure that I guess I just like some more information as far as what that looks like, because it seems like there is some, from where I'm standing, it seems like there's inconsistency as far as where the state has said versus what we're actually doing. And that may just be that I just don't understand what the state's actually asking for. So maybe we can just follow up with that to see where we're going, because I would prefer that if we, as we've stated in the past, that we're not being any more restrictive than what the state is requiring. And so if we're doing something that's more restrictive, then what's the justification for that? What are we, why are we doing that? It's kind of bad enough already. So that's what I had on schools. On the testing front, I know that we've seen a reduced amount in testing, and I brought this up before. Are we allowing for more broader testing with the public now that, even with our own public health lab, if we have capacity to do that, are we moving in that direction? Because I know that, that's the other metric that's a large portion, is having a lower percentage of positivity. And if we can get the larger public versus just people that have symptoms, if we're looking at symptomatic folks, that's always going to be have higher rates.
Yes, and that's definitely true in terms of if you're targeting the symptomatic, you're going to have generally a higher positivity percentage. This has been something we've been struggling with. Our Optum sites, not surprisingly, have been down in terms of utilization, and we're we're asking those exact questions to the state of, it would be tragic to lose an Optum site because we're implementing what is the guidelines that the state put out for not testing asymptomatic. Our understanding is the Optum sites, anybody can still sign up. There's, on the screening tool, they do give prioritization to those that are symptomatic, and I guess they reserve a certain block of those appointments, but it's not to prevent somebody who is, potentially asymptomatic from then just registering to get a test collected. But we're looking for more formalized guidance on that because I agree. We know we're underutilizing some of our resources that we could be utilizing because of those guidelines.
Okay, so with Optum, we do have options, but the public can get tested more and they can go utilize those sites. Even if they're reserving it, if they're being underutilized, then the likelihood of getting tested is high.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, we're not filling the number of appointment spots we have on a daily basis, so we could definitely be seeing more people coming through those sites.
And from our own public lab, we have, it looks like we have capacity to turn around tests.
Yeah, if we had to ramp up, like if we had a skilled nursing facility or if we had a larger outbreak in another facility or the jails, we do have some capacity there that we could definitely ramp up. Same with Kuia Delta.
Thank you. And then the last part I'd just like to bring up, and I saw in your report the numbers on child welfare services and the amount of calls to the child abuse hotline, with 157 calls last week, or 2 weeks ago, 192 last week. How do those numbers compare to previous years?
Let me ask staff to do a comparison for that, to give you a year-by-year analysis. I think that's a good question.
Yeah, I think context is good. I mean, we know the amount of stress that this is placing on families. We've heard in the past as far as what it's doing to domestic violence, and so I think that would be good to know how our families are hurting. Thank you. That's all.
Supervisor Valero?
Yes. So I just want to reiterate something that Supervisor Crocker mentioned, going back to school support. And that's why 2 weeks ago I had mentioned to this board and to the public that we need to be transparent in our reopening plans of our schools and their waivers, like Sonoma County has done and others, where they are posting the plans up as well as letting them know where they're at in the process. I think that is helpful and informative, so that way we can get everyone moving in that same direction.
And if it's not up already, and I apologize if it's not up already, we do have under the reopening the county on the school section, we have the list of waivers received, waivers that have been approved, what their status is, and we were going to be putting those waivers up there. I think the challenge we were running into with some waivers is the schools were providing us kind of an addendum as opposed to just revising their waiver application, and it was making it hard to follow and read, and so we were trying to work with them on some cleanup, but we definitely will have those waivers up there if they're not already.
And I just want to clarify real quick too. I mean, I want to make sure it's very clear that your office and your schools team is doing nothing secretive to permit waivers to advance. I mean, I don't think that that's fair to portray you as such. It's one thing to provide additional guidance and different templates on a web page, but how many schools have you said no to because of any criteria?
We haven't denied any waivers at this point.
Just even said no. I don't want to help you with your waiver. I mean, you guys have been incredibly helpful, and you have a specific team built to assist schools to go through this process. So you've been incredibly responsive and helpful. I just want to make sure that you are acknowledged and thanked for that, and not, made to be out as being secretive or guiding and helping only certain schools, because you've been incredibly helpful to all schools as I've interacted with folks from every size, shape, and color type of school. So thank you. Supervisor Townsend?
Yeah, Tim and Dr. Hott, just to follow up when Supervisor Crocker was asking his question about the waivers for PK through 2 through second. I think the bottom line of the question is, if the state is okay, or if we're okay with issuing waivers for PK through 2, why not PK through 3, 4, 5, or 6? And I didn't quite hear the answer to that question.
Yeah, and I didn't want to interrupt Supervisor Crocker either and didn't get a chance to go back, and I'll answer, and then if Dr. Hott wants to provide the other piece. Just for clarity, there is no specific restriction that says we could not be doing the TK through 6th at this point. The concern is the stabilization of that rate and wanting to make sure we stay at that rate and don't jump back up. However, by basically holding until next week, we would be taking a more restrictive approach than what technically is allowable by the state. So that, to be very clear on that piece, that is accurate. And that's a discussion that we were having yesterday on that very topic of do we, how much stability do we want to see? Do we want to see those rates continue to sit there, or do we open them up so that, recognizing that the schools are going to have to do some adjustment to get their teachers back in, get their students back in, and we're probably going to be into beginning of next week as it is.
Well, and that kind of gets to the bottom line of the question, is that the schools that we've granted some of these waivers to have opened as of Monday, some of them, and so their parents are very frustrated that now they've got a second grader and a third grader, or a second grader and a fourth grader. One's at school, one's not at school. And we're kind of doing it as, arbitrary might be too harsh of a word, but we have a line that we've created that the state didn't create. And so what will it take for us to say, all right, if you've submitted your plans and your plans were requesting TK through 6, that let's go ahead, and now that we're at that point, let's go ahead and give those waivers, because the state's allowing them. We've sort of given at least verbal direction in all of our discussions to not be more restrictive than the state. So Dr. Hott, are you prepared to do that?
Well, when the waivers were granted for the TK through 2, the state requested this to be reviewed and then submit the impact to them before they go permit the 3 through 6. So we need to collect that information and submit back to them for their input.
Excuse me for interrupting. What information are you submitting back to the state?
Well, we would just need to see if there was any difficulties with it, in the implementation of the K through 2, and any impact on rates, or not rates, but just cases developing in the schools, and then submit that information to them, and along with our current case rate, and get their response.
So it was my understanding that prior to this, that the state had given you the authority to grant waivers all the way through 6th without this middle.
No, they needed to approve. They needed to have input on each application.
So we were told on multiple occasions that the state does not approve, that they only review.
They consult. You are correct that they.
So we're the ones holding 3 through 6 hostage right now. Dr. Hott?
No, I need the state, when they gave their approval, they said that we needed to submit back to them if we want to, when we're ready to expand to 6.
Can you do that
So we
today?
can do that, but that's what the state
Can you do that
told us.
today, Dr. Hott? Are you prepared to do that today?
I'm prepared to collect the information, yes, and contact them.
Collect what information?
Just about what the experience has been at the schools, and if there's any problems with any cases, or that's what the state wants to know.
But you won't be able to, all you have right now is 1 day, 2 days. By the end of the day, you'll have 2 days of data.
Yes,
Are
I think that
are we
personally it
testing-
would
are
be
we
better to
testing
have a
children?
week or 2 weeks data, but I understand your point.
Well, yeah, and it's not just me talking to you, it's hundreds of parents throughout the county. So what we're trying to get to a conversation, not trying to be hard, trying to get to a conversation that we've been told repeatedly that the state has said TK through 6. We've put a line at TK through 2. It doesn't sound like that's a hard line that we should be holding. So what do we need to do to just modify your approval?
When we submitted the waiver applications to the state or our approval for them, the request was that they be TK through 2 because we weren't at the metric yet for actually approving waivers. So they said that was a good approach to be able to start with that and see how it, what the impact was.
And real quick,
then to come back to them when you are ready to go expand. So
and just to
we
give
can go
you,
back to them.
not to interrupt you, Dr. Hott, but just to give you a little bit clarity too, Dennis, my understanding through this whole thing has been the pre-K through 2 was actually granted before we even hit the metric, because that is the most vulnerable and susceptible to learning loss and not having the foundation blocks of learning how to read, learning how to write, those sorts of things at that. So our public health department, and Dr. Hott was supportive, took a step ahead of the state and put forward the submittal for pre-K through 2. But since that time that they had that contact with the state, our numbers have declined and gotten to the point to where we're below the 14 case or 14 per 100,000 number. So we're able to grant pre-K through 6. And I wanted to say that pre-K through 2 was actually able to go back last week, but no schools were able to because of the short time frame between learning they were able to and notifying teachers, preparing classrooms, and implementing the various measures of their waiver plan to do so. So that was looking back, but looking forward, I completely agree with you in terms of getting grades 3 through 6 now that we've hit the metric. I think it's an important point to look at what some other counties around us have done, and I'll just point to Kings, for example. I think Kings hit the under 14 number for like 22 minutes, and once they hit that number, they granted a waiver. I mean, they were ready to go. Kern County, did they even hit their number, Tim, or did they just grant the waiver? I don't even remember, but some counties are being a little bit more lenient, and I think that now that we've hit that number, and because of waiver plans being in place, just saying, hey, we've hit that number, kids back to school, it doesn't work like that. You have to have a specific waiver plan in place approved by public health for students to safely return to school, and it's not all students, it's pre-K through 6. If they're adhering to that plan, I see no reason why grades 3 through 6 couldn't just go back the same way we've granted pre-K through 2 since those numbers have stabilized. So,
Right,
and we have that ability.
To add to that, there's only been, as we've heard earlier, there's only been 11 waiver requests anyway. So we're not talking about, and I think only one of those is a public school. So we're really talking about a specific limited group that has requested it. So it doesn't seem like there's a big difference between the waivers we've granted and moving to that through 6th grade.
Yeah, and also to say too, I want to call back to a point that Tim Lutz made earlier, and that was that Tim Heyer did say we're going to be getting numerous applications from additional public schools who are seeing an opportunity to bring their kids back as well. So it's going to cross a complete spectrum of charter, private, and public.
Right.
Very soon.
So we should get out in front of it.
Yeah, I agree. So, sorry to interrupt your comments, Supervisor. Was that all that you had?
Well, so I'm looking for some sort of a commitment. We can look at next week that those are going to be expanded.
Yes, I will collect the information and then get the information to the state for their sign off.
I'd like to see it sooner, but
Yeah. Well, and again, does the state have to sign off, or do you sign off?
Yes,
The state did
they have to
indicate,
sign off. They don't usually, they review and they didn't object the last time to the K through 2, so.
Because we were told they don't have to sign off. So what? So I'm looking for the truth. Do they or don't they?
I guess it's,
Who has final authority is what I want to know.
difficult to define what sign off means. They do have to sign off, and it's required to submit the application to them and to have them review it. And if they don't get back to you in a certain amount of time, you're allowed to proceed without their response.
Yeah. So more or less, it's from the state level, it becomes they want to, it's a tracking mechanism for them in a review. They do not approve or deny as much as, again, as Dr. Hott said, if they don't respond within 3 days, I think, it automatically is approved. So the sign off at the state is really as a review and a tracking mechanism.
So can we submit that today to let them know that that's our intention? Dr. Hott?
There's this for the ones that have been approved. Yes, we can contact them today.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Supervisor Valero?
Yeah, I wanted to go back to a comment Chairman made with regards to our school support team. And by no way am I mentioning the lack of hard work. I know that they are doing extremely hard work in their division to make sure that our schools are up to speed, as well as providing the resources. And in no way did I think that things were being secretive in terms of who they're helping or not. My comment on that matter was simply to say that we need additional support mechanisms and support in order to get our schools in the right track. And so I just wanted to share that. Thank you.
Supervisor Crocker?
Yes, thank you. Just for a point of clarification, the K2 waivers were allowed regardless of any metric stated by the state. The state said that there was health and safety issues, and so it doesn't matter what metrics you were, there was allowances for to go through a waiver process if schools wanted to go through that, which is why those were approved prior to us meeting anything. And that was not unique for us, that was statewide. And then just to add to the other discussion as far as the waivers for grades 3 through 6, that I'd be supportive of, gathering information as soon as possible and submitting that to the state as soon as possible, so that we can begin giving them some guidance. I think that ultimately that's going to provide us with more information that we can look at a greater scope as far as what's going on with the schools that have already been granted waivers and the others that would be as well. And I think that's all going to be helpful. Thank you.
All right, and then I'll just conclude with just a few comments that I have. So on this whole thing, thank you for the report, not just on the school issue, but I really do appreciate the work of the team, and it's great to see the case rates in general trending in the direction they have been. We have to remain diligent in our approach to this pandemic and make sure that we continue to see the rates stabilize and decrease. That's how we are going to get to more schools being open, more sectors of our economy being allowed to reopen, and I think it's very important to consistently spread that message. But in terms of the schools specifically, I definitely am very supportive of an approach that gets grades 3 through 6 back as soon as possible, not even waiting till next week if it's possible. But, I think that some schools, have already, the 6 schools that have the ability to do so, that have begun returning pre-K through 2 students, have demonstrated for a day the ability to have students on campus, but to implement their plan, the waiver plan that has been submitted to public health, been approved by public health, and this is a safe way for kids to be back. And I appreciate the public health department going out on a limb for grades pre-K through 2, and that was prior to the numbers getting to where they're at. But now that the numbers have hit that critical point, I don't believe there's any reason to hesitate whatsoever in terms of allowing those plans to be implemented and expanded to include grades 3 through 6. I think that all kids should be back in a safe learning environment as soon as it's possible, and it's possible now. I don't want to be an additional roadblock in line with the state. I feel like the only roadblock in dealing with this whole situation and us being thwarted the way that we have been should be the state and not the county. So just a comment that I would make there. But again, appreciate all the work that you're doing, and hopefully we'll be seeing more open here in Tulare County sooner rather than later. Supervisor Valero.
Yes, and so I just want to make clear, because even though we do say, hey, we want schools to open up starting tomorrow or next week, we also have to understand the complexity of our school districts and our teachers and the contracts. So there's a lot at play here. And again, just want to make everyone clear that we can say yes tomorrow, but the school districts themselves will be the ones to ultimately make that decision as to how they proceed with their own school districts.
But and my point was just that we shouldn't stand in the way.
Yep.
So let each district, each board, each teachers union, they can all handle what they're going to be doing. I don't think Tulare County should be an additional hurdle.
But I was just providing an informative.
Okay, any additional questions or comments from board members? Any public comments specifically related to this? Okay, thank you very much, Tim, appreciate that. Now we're going to move on to the next item on our agenda, which is item number 3, public comments. I have numerous requests. First request I have is from Pam Silva. Please come forward, state your name and address for the record. Public comment can only be limited to 3 minutes per speaker. Thank you.
Good morning. I don't want to touch it. Here we go. Supervisor Townsend, I'm sorry to hear about your mother's passing. I'm sure she is in a good place. God bless. Okay, I'm here this morning to talk about what we're going through with the state and our county here. Now, I know you've all taken an oath. I solemnly swear I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States. That's where it begins. And then you have something called the Bill of Rights. And the Bill of Rights actually tells you, Title 18 USC, I skipped a part. Whenever under color of law, statute, ordinance, regulation, or custom willfully subjects any person in any state, territory, commonwealth, possession, district, of any of their deprivation of any rights, privileges, or immunities secured and protected. You all know this, right? We have constitutional rights. Let me go on to say, the rights that are protected are under the Bill of Rights. It protects freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and the right to keep and bear arms, the freedom of assembly. So what we have with the state of emergency, right, is we can't go to church. Per county, our county is health officer. Sorry, I'm having trouble with my tech. Okay, so what is the difference between isolation and quarantine? So here I have from the Health and Human Services, right? They say a quarantine separates and restricts the movement of people who were exposed to a contagious disease to see if they become sick. These people may have been exposed to disease and not know it, or they may have the disease but do not show symptoms. So that is what is a quarantine. The children being treated as they are sick and as if they could, and being not allowed to enter that is a restriction of movement by law. That's what that is. Now, we have in this letter, this order from Karen Hout, she says it's a state of emergency. Well, you got 60 days for the state to do it and for our county to do it. We're way past that. So by our own county ordinance that she quoted in there as giving her power to do it, 115-1033 is what she quoted. We'll read the rest of that ordinance. E, right to request a release. That has to be posted when you quarantine people. That hasn't been done. This was supposed to be to flatten the curve. And we're flat. The curve is flat, and we're doing more harm than good. Now, the FDA says you get remdesivir if you're in the hospital and your O2 saturation is 94% or below. You're sick by then, and that antiviral at that point isn't really helping a lot of people. There's where we have our deaths. 94% of the COVID deaths are from comorbidities. I know people who have known people that have died from a heart attack, and it was considered COVID. That's not acceptable. The FDA has stopped the use of hydroxychloroquine. They say, no, you can't do that. But we all know that there's proof that prophylactic hydroxychloroquine can and does stop your viral load. No, I'm not a doctor, but I know sense.
Can you wrap up your comments, please?
Yes,
Ms. Silva?
the CDC has not updated recommendations for the 6 months. There has been no movement, no leadership from the FDA, the CDC, on how we're going to treat this. And our own Karen Holt has done nothing but say, no, you can't go anywhere. You're quarantined, and you have no right of habeas corpus to get out of this. No, we need to follow the law.
Thank you for your
All or
comments.
nothing. Thank you.
Okay, next I want to call forward the chief, because I know he has a lot to attend to right now, but he did want to give a fire update for the public.
Morning, everyone.
Morning.
All right. Which one is it, Matt? One that says SQF complex, is that it? Sorry. So I'll give you the map. Then you map. Let's show you map. Here, talk amongst yourselves. I know it's a short agenda. There's the SQF, it's got today's date. We'll get the map going here in just a second. Sorry about this. The only thing you're gonna get from me is high cholesterol, buddy. Good. SQF complex, just wanted to, a very serious situation, but I just want to say, Sequoia National Forest, land of many uses. I've seen that sign probably 28 times in the last 3 weeks, going back and forth up to the command post. We're currently at 108,000 acres, 12% containment. Those are both estimates with the IR flights. Really want to thank our public for adhering to our evacuation orders. Once we have the life safety issues mitigated, we're very in good shape. Most of this incident was going very well until we hit Saturday night. And Saturday night we had some calls that it was having erratic wind conditions, large changes in wind conditions, and it was starting to run. Yeah, it's the BAM map. Thanks, bud. Was starting to run that canyon. And some of these unprecedented wind conditions really created some significant challenges for us. This is because I'm... Got it. Can everyone see that okay? Okay, good. As you can see on the scale, this fire grew to the northwest on Saturday. It went through roughly 8.5 sections, so it grew 8 miles to the northwest. It expanded, as you can see, Piles Boys Camp, which is in Division Yankee, Division Y there. We did do some protective measures. We were in good shape there. And it did infringe on Cedar Slope, Doyle Springs, and somewhat on Camp Nelson. Sequoia Crest is completely, was completely consumed. We do have, we did get in there, we did structure protection early, we did a lot of perimeter control early, we did have aircraft in during that, a lot of that time, hit and miss based on resource availability throughout the state. Our crews did some magnificent work. On Saturday night when that was running through Sequoia Crest, we had 50 to 60 foot flame lengths working off of the timbers, and some of those we had to pull crews out of there to ensure firefighter safety, to make sure that they were coming home. At this time, and we've lost approximately 100 structures, and that is through a windshield survey. That is not confirmed. We do have to get in there, do some damage assessment teams, and I assume that figure is going to be much higher. But you have my heart of hearts that we defended those to the best of our ability. The majority of our damage is in Alpine Village, Sequoia Crest, Cedar Slope, and now there's some on Doyle Springs. We did have some infringement on Camp Nelson yesterday. The crews are backfiring the east side of that community to try and protect that area. And a lot of these people have been on, myself included, have been on since August 18th when this started, and they are really doing some hard work in there. As we move forward, once the fire front has moved through there, we have crews that are performing some cold trailing and mop up to try and get in there and salvage if there's any. A lot of these things aren't raging fire fronts. They're embers that land on a shingle, some protection, and crews are getting there to mop up to prevent any more structure loss in those already affected areas. Northwest fire travel is still a concern on that northwest corner. Our positive on that is once it gets, not even to Cinnamon Canyon, but it starts traveling at northwest past Denison Mountain, you gotta have a lot of seasonal grasses and live oaks. It'll be much easier to pick up than in the heavy timbers. So looking forward to using some of that natural topography. With these structure losses, and again, thank God we have all the people out of there through evacuation orders. I do take these personally. I have to look at all these community members that know me. They don't know me by chief. They call me Charlie, and they have a lot of great intel, and I'm very loyal to these people, as you are yourselves. And again, I will not try and politicize this, but this incident started outside of our initial attack area, started outside of our jurisdiction, and I had some vastly different philosophies on strategy and tactics in expressing this. But once again, it became our problem in the county. And as I look at a $27 million bill, anticipated $40 million bill, luckily we have FMAG, CFAA, we have some agreements in place, but we had these issues with the Cedar Fire, with the Pier Fire, with the Schaefer Fire. So it is not a new thing for us. And I am arm in arm with my colleagues, and we'll try and do everything we can for our taxpaying public. But I have some serious concerns in the future, and I hope this isn't detrimental to my employment. But this is very, very concerning as the county fire chief trying to protect my county structures and somebody else's fire starting in their area, burning into my area. So it's very territorial. We'll continue to protect our assets at risk. Again, $27 million estimated cost of the incident is $40 million. I see us going way beyond that. And our estimated containment date is September 30th. I see it going beyond that. I have been fielding a lot of calls from property owners in all these communities. If you have friends that need to make contact, I will get them as much damage assessment information. We will get an accurate report over the next several days. But by all means, have them call me. I can't imagine losing a structure, whether it's a vacation home as your primary residence. It's got to be the worst feeling in the world. So please have them call me, and just know in your heart of hearts that we're doing everything we can to positively mitigate this incident. So probably too much emotion on that fact, but I would answer any questions you have at this time.
And thank you for the hard work, Chief. You're doing a wonderful job, and I appreciate all the information that you've been sharing with the board throughout the event, and really do pass on our thanks and our thoughts and prayers to the men and women in the fire service who are up there trying to keep our county and our assets, our population, our communities safe. Much appreciated.
Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Supervisor Townsend.
Just more of a statement that, but yeah, please, thank you so much for all that you're doing. Please feel free to express your true opinions about what as we go forward about what we need to do to help and to take care of what, because this is a situation where maybe there wasn't cooperation up front like there needed to be, and we need to know that so we can elevate that up and we can lobby for change.
Absolutely.
So thank you, Charlie. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for all your support.
Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't have an intro. Congratulations.
Next, I will call up Karen Elliott to come forward. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, board. CEO, County Council. I want to thank Chief Norman for everything that he and all the crew are doing. Prayers to them, and I want to thank Deanne also for all her service and guidance. We're going to miss you a lot. I am here this morning because I am very excited and privileged to say that our Public Health Department was awarded accreditation on September 1st by the Public Health Accreditation Board. We are the 17th county within California to receive this accreditation. There are also 2 cities, City of Pasadena, City of Berkeley, and the California Department of Public Health that has been awarded accreditation, but I feel so much pride and joy of the staff and the work that we have done that we are the 17th county to get this accreditation. We began this in November 2017, so one of you was sitting at the table right at that point, so we have come a long way since then. It was about a 4.5-year work to get to where the site visitors came, February 5th and 6th. And it was then when we only knew COVID as 2019 novel coronavirus. So a lot has happened since then. In receiving accreditation, what happens is that you basically we submitted 330 documents, which included a lot of plans, the workforce development plan, the community health assessment, the community health improvement plan, a performance management and quality improvement plan. So it was a lot of work that went into it. What it also is during accreditation, that you build your relationships and making sure that you're working with the tribe, you make sure you're working with the community and our community partners. I think our relationship strengthened through all of this. Also, it means that we are communicating with our governing board. So we are bringing what processes, legislation responsibilities that public health has, and we are informing you. I am also just very proud to say that based on, I have not reviewed the entire portal that FAB has up, but I can tell you through my accreditation coordinator that we are at 95%, and the average for people who actually achieve accreditation throughout the nation is 89. So we were above average. So I am so thrilled with my staff. We have had people who have come and gone since then. We've had people who were here maybe a couple years. We had people here who were a couple months. They were the ones who went before the site visitors and gave all the information. I know that we had the chair, the vice chair, and our CEO that also met with them. But we will be putting out a press conference today. It is something I think to be proud of in terms of for Tulare County and for public health. We have been in this COVID-19 oversight for 231 days. So getting that in the middle of that was a huge boost in morale. We are going to do what we can to celebrate it with our staff, COVID-19 style. But I just did want to come up and let the board know that we had achieved this.
Okay, great. Go ahead, Supervisor.
Well, just congratulations to your staff. You can see it in your face, the excitement, and you should be proud. There's a lot of work went into it, and congratulations. Thank you.
And thank you for all the hard work. I know that I've had the pleasure of serving on the Health Advisory Committee, and now Supervisor Joaquin does, and we've both worked very closely with public health. And I know the work that is being done in the department, and really do appreciate all the passion and energy and joy that you bring to your job every day, and that your staff brings, because it's definitely evident when you interact with public health that you are proud of what you do, and you should be. The state's even proud of you too by accrediting you the way they have. So thank you very much.
I've got a great team under me. It's all on them, so I really appreciate them.
All right, great. Thank you. Next request I have is from Paul Saldana.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Paul Saldana with the Tulare County Economic Development Corporation. Later today, we'll be issuing our monthly economic advisory report, but I wanted to take the opportunity to share with the board a couple of very positive highlights. Over the past 12 weeks, with a grant from SoCal Gas Company, the EDC has spent nearly $90,000 with local restaurants every Tuesday evening. The meals purchased have been delivered to seniors in care facilities across the county. Restaurants participated in the program, and some are even actually continuing to make donations on their own to these care facilities beyond what we've paid for with our grant. Let me share with you a couple of comments we received from the residents. One said, thank you for your kindness and generosity in these trying times of COVID-19, in some ways unique to seniors. During the heat of the summer, it has been a blessing to not have to cook, especially for those unable to get beyond the complex easily, to have professionally prepared, nutritious meal. Please accept our gratitude. Another one added, they'll be trying to visit the restaurants that serve these excellent meals after COVID-19 is not a problem, and that being a retired senior citizen can be a lonely life, so it's nice to see that we have not been forgotten. The program was designed to be an economic investment in our communities to help local businesses, but as you can see, it has had a positive impact in the lives of these residents of our communities. Our relationship with the dozens of restaurants and care facilities that we've developed over the last 12 weeks has provided the opportunity for us to do something we didn't expect to be doing, but we'll be working with both sides to coordinate the delivery of holiday meals later on this year, further stimulating economic activity. Earlier this year, we launched COVID-19BizAssist.com, which actually next month is being recognized nationally as one of a key website by our International Professional Association on delivering business information to those in need. We're continuing building the ecosystem for supporting small businesses by launching Size Up Tulare County, which will support recovery and growth of local businesses by delivering them the type of big data large corporations use to size up their competition, compare their performance in industry, find customers and identify suppliers, as well as optimize their advertising. The new tool will be launched later this week and will be free to all businesses to utilize. Last month, we deployed a mapping system that provides location on local businesses and began building the database of their hours of operation and shopping protocols, as well as online links for businesses. As Supervisor Valero indicated, we'll be talking later today about our partnership with Cal State Fresno to deploy more resources to the rural communities and businesses throughout the county. As you know, our mission is to attract, support, and retain business and industry for Tulare County, and as such, we'll continue to identify and deploy these resources, tools, and programs to provide hope in a future to our local residents and continued business and economic stimulation. With that, I'd like to particularly thank the Vice Chair for her leadership role in on the EDC board, and to your staff in the Economic Development team. They've all been tremendous in terms of working collaboratively on these areas, and we're looking forward to continuing to work on recovery and renewal measures in the future. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Next, I have a request from Ellen Woitala. Okay. Next request I have is from Marty Ferguson. They're public comment. Okay, so I'm sorry, they are for agenda item 16. I will take them up at that time. Are there remaining public comments at this time that are for items under the board's jurisdiction but not appearing on today's agenda? Any phone call comments? Thank you, Madam Clerk. Okay, that concludes the public comment period. I will close that and now bring it back to take up our 10 o'clock timed item at almost 11 o'clock. So this is the time and place for the Tulare County budget hearings. I will adjourn as the Tulare County Board of Supervisors and convene as the, you're going to do your presentation first? Okay, before I do that, go for it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Jason Britt, County Administrative Officer. It is my pleasure today to present the fiscal year 2021 recommended budget for your review, modification, and/or adoption. Assembling a budget of this size and complexity is difficult during any year, but has been exceptionally difficult this year. I deeply appreciate the team effort of both the elected and appointed department heads and county staff who worked diligently throughout the pandemic to submit their budgets on time and on target. Department heads are here in the chamber today, as well as many who may be available by Zoom. in case the board has questions regarding their budgets during this hearing. This year's fiscal year 2021 recommended budget reflects a largely status quo budget. We will discuss some proactive reductions we took to help address the unknown effects of the COVID-19 pandemic on economic activity and county revenues later in this presentation. Had to turn on. Before I get started into this year's presentation, I just wanted to hit a couple highlights from our 1920 budget. The county did end our fiscal year 1920 budget in a very positive financial position. We were able to improve and replace a number of assets and equipments throughout our departments, including dedicating $1.5 million to purchase fire equipment. We also completed some various capital projects and building improvements to the tune of about $5.8 million. We continue to set aside money to pay for our jail medical expenses and mental health expenses. And then we also assigned additional funds to help purchase future or to upgrade future ERP and financial and human services countywide technology projects. So those are just, we also increased the strategic reserve by $2 million. So those are just some very, very high highlights of what we did in 1920. This year's budget protocol is the same budget protocol we have used for a number of years, which is revenue estimates are budgeted conservatively by comparing with actual historical revenue trends. One-time funds are used for one-time purposes when setting departmental budget targets. Structural increases to department budgets are done through a thorough analysis of need, evaluating ongoing revenue opportunities and operational efficiencies. All proposed budgets must be fiscally sustainable, and any proceeds from sales of real property are designated for future capital needs. Briefly, I just want to share a couple quick slides on the state's budget, because that state's budget is sort of how we inform our county budget. So quick highlights there are the state's total budget is $202 billion. The state's general fund is roughly $134 billion, and they do have budget reserves of $11.4 billion. And then there's a breakdown there of $8.3 for the rainy day fund balance, $2.6 billion in special funds for economic uncertainties, $450 million in a safety net reserve. And I did want to note that the state did balance their budget by reducing salary for state employees, including public safety.
And that was 10% for their general employees and 7% for safety?
It varied depending on bargaining unit, but I think it worked out to be like 9.23%, and some were under 5% for public safety. But when you add them all together and take an average, it came up to that. Some key impacts to counties as a result of the state's to the county as a result of of the state's budget. Positively, it gave us $1 billion realignment backfill, which $250 million is dependent upon federal funding. So the reality is we were guaranteed $750 million for our social services and public safety realignment funding streams. So that was a general fund backfill from the state. Otherwise, without that backfill, we would be looking at further reductions to make up the loss in that revenue. $550 million to support housing for homeless or at-risk homeless due to COVID. $300 million to Homeless Coordinating Council and Financing Council. The proposal to close or realign the Division of Juvenile Justice to counties. And so between the time we developed this PowerPoint and budget and now, there has been bills and legislation passed that will transfer that responsibility from the Department of Juvenile Justice back to the counties. And that will likely create some very large cost shifts depending upon how we negotiate the funding, but and we'll probably have to have more detailed information from our chief probation officer, but this is something that is going to affect the county's future budget in the fact that we have to provide higher level of care, a different type of care for the juveniles who are over 18 who are still in custody for crimes committed as a juvenile. Also requires CDSCR to identify and close a prison by January 10th, 2021. Expands investments in CAL FIRE OES and other local agencies for ongoing wildfire preparation. $50 million matching grant to prepare, respond, and mitigate the impacts of public safety power shutoffs. $100 million for the presidential election, and there is sort of the negative piece of it is reducing funding for child support agencies to the 2018 levels. And so, as you know, child support has been an agency that has been struggling to increase their funding allocations from the state, and they made some headway a few years ago, and they've sort of lost that and eroded that headway. So on to the county's highlights. Our total budget with all funds this year is $1.45 billion. That's a $68.7 million increase over last year. Our general fund budget is $886.8 million. That's a $42.2 million increase. Our discretionary revenues are projected at $178.1 million, which is a $1.3 million increase over last year, but as stated in the budget protocol, we are using conservative estimates, mostly due to the unknown effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. The general fund net county cost is $220.4 million. That's a $2.7 million decrease, largely because of some of the proactive measures we took. And then the general fund unassigned fund balance was $42.3 million this year, which was a $4 million decrease. The strategic reserve will be at $30 million, which is a $2 million decrease, and will also reduce contingency by $1 million to $4 million. We typically have contingency at $5 million. We're also reserving $1 million for emergencies, and based on the fire chief's comments earlier, that probably isn't enough. But that's for fire, floods, and tree mortality. Capital improvements are $3 million this year. Replacing some county fire vehicles and other equipment is at $3.3 million. Some aerial apparatus, we want to purchase an aerial apparatus for our fire department this year at $1.8 million. And the aerial apparatus is the ladder truck. This budget also reflects 2O staffing for our new Fire Station 1 that opened back in July. It will also fund a debt retirement of $1.3 million, which I'll talk about a little bit later. We're also funding $1.9 million in economic development activities, a little over $1 million for IT projects, mostly infrastructure projects, conflict defender at $1 million, and GSA, which are Groundwater Sustainability Agency memberships, and water activities at $1.1 million. For outside funds, we are budgeting $363,586 for aviation navigation aids out at Sequoia Field. We're also budgeting $1.3 million with the county fire for various tree mortality projects, capital assets, tools, and supplies to do that work. The road fund, county transportation improvement program, which the board listened to and approved earlier this year, is at $55.9. Solid waste, Visalia Phase 4 expansion at $9 million. $3 million, a little over $3 million to purchase 6 new transit buses. And then a variety of capital projects throughout the county, including the new Sequoia Field program facility, the Center Drive furniture and fixtures, an infectious disease clinic out at our health clinic on Dinuba Boulevard, emergency dispatch relocation to the Tulare Acres Professional Center, a Dinuba Library, and the remodel of the Terabella Fire Station. So we'll go through a number, this is just a summary sheet. We'll go through all of this history and revenues, and please feel free to stop at any time if you have questions. So looking at a 5-year snapshot of our general fund history, you can see that it has increased from 2016-17 to 2021. Couple years had smaller increases, but we've had fairly between 4 and 5% increases over the last number of years, which is a good thing. County revenues, looking at, so that's the expense side. So on the revenue side, we've had a 2% change for year over year as you look from left to right. If you look at our secured property tax at 45, and then at 2019 at 47, and then this year we're looking at 48.8. So that's been a 2% change there. You can also see a similar 4.5% increase over the last 3 years for motor vehicle fees. In 2018-19's adopted budget, we were at 52.5, and that now we're at 55.6. Local sales tax, we are anticipating a small decrease at 11.5, and then we are also anticipating a decrease in our Prop 172 sales tax at 31.6. And then all other revenues, we're projecting about a 6% revenue decrease there. Again, these are all best estimates because we really don't know how the collection of sales tax and other revenue is gonna occur during due to the COVID-19 pandemic this year. So that's how we got to the $178.1 million revenue estimate that we're proposing in this budget. Again, a quick look at the 5-year unassigned fund balance. In 2016, it was at 31.6 million, and then it went up to 38.2, 47.2, 46.3 last year, and at 42.2 this year. Our sales and use chart, use tax allocation chart, all the years in gray are actual historical collections, and the blue is our recommended budget. So we are recommending a slight decrease based on our actual historical projections, again, largely due to the unknown collection activity and how that's going to pan out with all the complexities that have occurred in the COVID-19 timeframe. Not only will people be spending money, will they have money to spend, but also there was some deferrals that the state allowed for sales tax payments for businesses in the beginning of the pandemic, and some of that still has not been sort of clearly known to all of us. Our Prop 172 public safety sales tax, and this is where we help fund our public safety departments out of. Again, all of the gray bars are the historical actual received, and the blue is our recommended. As I mentioned earlier, we are estimating a small decrease, again, largely unknown to the pandemic. Our local assessed evaluation growth without exemptions. This local evaluation and property taxation is a good indicator of how our economy is growing and economic development activities are occurring in Tulare County. This year, for fiscal year 2021, it's a $39.7 billion, which is a $1.9 billion increase over last year. We have a 3-year average growth rate of 4.949%. And if you look at that same numbers with the exemptions, it's a $38.3 billion assessed evaluation with a $1.8 billion growth. And the growth rate as reported by the assessor is at 4.957, making that a 5.011% 3-year average growth rate, and then seeing a slight increase in new building permits for fiscal year 19-20 at 161. Here's a chart that shows that same information. So you can see since 2007 to today, our assessed evaluation and property taxation has been steadily growing and increasing, which is a good thing for our county and for the general fund, and to show that economic activity is increasing in the county. Looking at a comparison of county funds, we have the first fund, which is the general fund. So based on last year's adopted budget, it was $844 million. This year's recommended budget is $886 million for a difference of $42.2 million, 5% increase. Other operating funds, last year was our adopted budget was $388.9 million. This year we're at $409.3, which represents a $20.3 million or 5.2% increase. Our county service areas, last year we adopted a $1.4 million budget. This year we're recommending a $1.3 million budget. Unfortunately, that does represent a decrease of $68,000 or 4.7%. Enterprise funds grew very slightly at 0.2%. Last year, our adopted budget was at $43.8 million. This year is at $43.9 for a difference of $76,000. Internal service funds, last year we had a $94.9 million budget. This year we're recommending $102.2 million, which is a difference of almost $7.3 million or 7.7%. And then our special districts, $7.9 million budget last year with an $8 million this year, a small increase of $145,000 or 1.8%. When you add all those up, we're up to our $1.45 billion budget over our 1.38 last year, which is a represents of $68.6 million increase or a 5% increase. Moving on to looking at a comparison of our authorized staffing, broken down by general fund and other funds. Our 18-19 adopted budget had 5,033.63 authorized staff. Last year we had 5,105.63, and this year we're recommending 5,005.63 for a reduction of 100 positions in the county. Very quickly, we'll look at county budgets by activity, and this is where we group them essentially by budget activity. So our Health and Human Services budget is at $749.1 million. Public Safety is at $255.2 million. Transportation, we'll be spending $112.9 million. Internal Service Funds, again, back at the 102.3. Supporting other county departments is at 76.1. General Government and Operations at 48.7. Property Assessment, Public Finance and Accounting at 43.9. If we look at our assessment districts, County Service Area, Specialty and Solid Waste is at 30 million. Land Use Development and Infrastructure is at 21.6. And then Agriculture, Research, Fish and Wildlife at 10.6. So that's just sort of a summary of if we group them by sort of functions. The county long-term debt obligations as of June 30th, 2020, our pension obligation bonds are at $232.9 million. Our variable rate demand bonds are at $31.1 million, and this is our Millennium Fund. So although we do have debt on that fund, we do generate positive income off of those bonds. Our Chevron loan is payable at $1.3 million. This is the debt we will be retiring if the board were to adopt this budget today, so that we can retire that debt. We do owe some certificates of participations for our enterprise funds of about $1 million. We do have some bonds for the El Rancho Sewer District at $3,800. So that makes our total long-term debt about $266 million. I do have to say, based on a county of our size and budget, that is a very low debt commitment if you look at other counties compared to us. Quickly looking ahead to the future, I know sometimes we get tired of talking about the COVID pandemic, but we did start experiencing the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic in March of 2020. This did result in a sustained public health emergency response, shelter-in-place orders, and closures of much of the economy. And so therefore, we instituted a proactive budget mitigation measure. So early on, we identified that this could have a negative impact on our budget. So some of the ways that my office worked alongside our department heads to mitigate the I will say again, largely unknown effects. We will start to know them better as time goes on this budget year. We reduced net county cost budgets by approximately 2% below last year's budget. So each department took an approximate 2% reduction. We deleted chronically vacant positions over 730 days. So if departments had vacant positions over 730 days, we asked them to delete them, and that's what you saw in that reduction of that 100 positions on the previous slide on authorized staffing. We also delayed large purchases and capital projects from going forward if we were not already in contract or in progress. And we did institute a countywide hiring freeze so that we would only hire positions that were absolutely necessary. All of these actions together really are helping us address the effects of the pandemic as they become known. Our plan to continue to address the potential economic downturn and potential fiscal uncertainty is continue to work with our economic development to keep a robust strategy with emphasis on assessed valuation growth, using strategic reserves to maintain status quo operations, maintain some contingency reserves, invest in revenue generating improvements, projects, activities, focus on operational efficiencies, propose budget allocations that are feasible and sustainable for the long term, and if necessary, we can make budget adjustments at mid-year, which usually happens around March of the following calendar year. So that's kind of our plan to help offset some of the effects of COVID-19. Additionally, departments have worked very hard and collaboratively to identify technological enhancements that would allow us to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of county operations. And although this list here today is probably not representative of all of the projects, I did want to highlight some projects that are scheduled to be implemented this budget year that will also assist us in, number one, moving the county forward into a more update, modern business process, but also help us to mitigate some of the unknown effects of the pandemic. One is as you heard in our CARES presentation, we're securing additional laptops and technology to expand telework capabilities. We're also increasing our use of cloud computing. We're rolling out 18 ballot on-demand printers for 18 polling places. We're also expected to implement Microsoft Office 365 county-wide, and essentially that is a cloud-based suite of Microsoft Office products. So all the Microsoft Office products that staff have on their computers today will go to the cloud, and that will increase our efficiency tremendously. We'll also be implementing an online parks reservation system for arbors in our parks. We've also adopted the Relias e-learning and training platform as our countywide training platform, which also allowed us to retire the former platform. And also the district attorney is implementing a new web-based case management system called eProsecutor, which will help him do his work much more efficient. And then for the clerk's office and the board, we're also implementing PrimeGov, which is a new agenda management program for the board, and public search portal, and OpenGov, which is a cloud-based budgeting and financial management system, which will also be available to the public and also allow our budget to be more easily viewed and potentially with some interactive enhancements that people can interact with the budget online. And then e-review, which allows permitting projects, records and processes to become electronic. So further streamlining those permitting processes at our RMA. So I would be remiss without talking about the challenges, financial challenges that are going to come up. And again, a lot of these financial challenges are not new to us, but they do continue to place a significant strain on our budget. One is just the rising cost of law enforcement, fire, and capital and staffing needs, increasing annual retirement contributions, increasing financial share of mandated programs. Our Health and Human Services programs, our in-home supportive care program, jail medical and mental health care, our internal service funds, zones of benefits, and really our need for a new countywide financial and human resources systems. And then, of course, the unknown duration and impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. So all of these are going to continue to put cost pressures, particularly on our general fund, as the time goes forward. We will get more clarity towards the latter end of this year on what our increase for entire annual retirement contributions will look like. But we will continue to face some of these significant cost pressures as time goes forward. So I think I said this last year, but I'm going to repeat them this year. Strategies for the board to consider stable budgets in future years. Continue to be negotiating financially sustainable labor agreements. Limit the use of debt, issuance of debt. Use one-time funds for one-time expenses. Fund the strategic reserve to the stated reserve ratio reflected in the reserve policy. And I do want to stop there and say, because I did not say it in my previous slide, is that this budget does reflect a $2 million budget from that strategic reserve and a reduction of $1 million in our contingency to help mitigate the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic or the effects of that. We will also continue to collaborate with TSERA, the Employees Retirement Association, to minimize the impacts of any significant cost increases. We will continue to utilize conservative revenue estimating practices. We will encourage departments to maximize the use of non-general fund revenues to minimize the burden on the general fund, and encourage and support departments to adopt business practices designed to help organizations function more effectively and efficiently. I want to say thank you to the Board of Supervisors for all their assistance and guidance to the process, including their staff, the board representatives, the CAO staff who worked diligently to put this all together, and then all the county agencies and departments, leadership and staff. Again, as I said in my opening comments, a budget of this size and difficulty is difficult during any year, but we had some difficult challenges, some people working from home, some not able to work, and so I do want to appreciate everyone really stepping up and making it happen. Not only did we deliver the budget on time, but we also delivered it correctly and ready for today. County Council for all of their help and advice, the Auditor, Controller, Treasurer, Tax Collector, who also assisted us in proofreading the budget book, which is a small task, and also HR&D and the agency, General Services Agency, Print and Mail Department, who turned around the printing of our budget books very, very quickly. So with that, we will, if there are no questions from the board, we will move in to our budget hearing script with the chairman.
Okay, I want to open the budget hearing right now, and we will adjourn as the Tulare County Board of Supervisors and convene as the Terabella Maintenance District. At this time, the hearing is open.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Enterprise funds are used for activity for which a fee is charged to external users for goods or services. As such, I'm asking the board to adopt the fiscal year 2021 final budget for the Terabella Sewer Maintenance District and authorize the Auditor Controller to make any minor adjustments in order to bring the budget into final balance. If there are no specific comments or questions about this fund, I will ask the board to take the action just described.
Any questions or comments from board members related to this? Are there any public comments related to this specific item? Okay, I will close the public hearing and bring it back to the board for action. I have a motion by Supervisor Townsend, a second by Supervisor Valero. Please vote. Motion passes 5-0 unanimously. We will now adjourn as the Terabella Sewer Maintenance District and convene as the Tulare County Flood Control District. I will open this public hearing for the Tulare County Flood Control District.
Thank you. Your board reviews plans and project statements throughout the year for the Tulare County Flood Control District. As such, I'm asking the board to adopt the fiscal year 2021 final budget for the Tulare County Flood Control District and authorize the auditor controller to make any necessary minor adjustments in order to bring the fiscal year 2021 budget into final balance. If there are no specific questions or comments about this fund, I will ask the board to take the action just described.
Any questions or comments from board members? Okay, seeing none, are there any public comments on this item? Okay, seeing none, I will close the public hearing and bring it back to the board for formal action.
Move approval?
I have a motion by Supervisor Shockley and a second by Supervisor Townsend. Please vote. Motion passes 5-0 unanimously. We will now adjourn as the Tulare County Flood Control District and reconvene as the Tulare County Board of Supervisors. I will open the public hearing for the remainder of the funds for the 2020-2021 recommended budget.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The remainder of the funds will now be presented for your review, discussion, modification, and final approval. We will start with our Enterprise and Assessment District funds. And I just have to say here, this is the fun part of the agenda because I have to read every single one of these. So, Enterprise and Assessment District funds are used for an activity for which a fee is charged to external users for goods or services. The funds include solid waste, transit, and LNM funds, assessment districts, which include L01, Orosi Lighting and Landscape, L05, Orosi Storm Drain, L10, Orosi Storm Drain, L16, Early Mart Lighting and Landscaping, L60, Tipton Storm Drain, L65, Early Mart Storm Drain, L70, Cutler Storm Drain, L75, Teviston Storm Drain, L80, Early Mart Storm Drain, L85, Orosi Storm Drain, L86, Visalia Storm Drain 07-792, and L87, Visalia Storm Drain 07-767. Also, L88, Visalia District, L89, Traver Storm Drain, and L90, Visalia Storm Drain 14-797. L91, Visalia Storm Drain, L92, Goshen Storm Drain, L93, Orosi District, M03, Strathmore Road, M04, Porterville Road, M06, Visalia Road 06-772, M87, Visalia Road 07-767R. No, I'm sorry, and I missed one. M88, Goshen Road 09-0804, M89, Goshen 12-804R, M90, Visalia 13-792R, Visalia M91, Visalia 14-792R, M92, Visalia Road 16-767R, M93, Goshen Road 18-789R, and M94, Orosi District 19-17-003R. If there are no specific comments or questions about these funds from the board, I will move forward. Okay? The County Service Area 1 and 2 budgets provide for activities that are specific to areas and projects. Users pay fees for these activities. The County Service Areas 1 and 2 include the following: C15 Lemon Cove Water, Z01 El Rancho Sewer, Z10 Delph Colony Sewer, Z11 Delph Colony Water, Z50 Seville Sewer, Z60 Tonyville Sewer, Z70 Tullyville Sewer, Z80 Traver Sewer, Z90 Yedem Sewer, Z91 Yedem Water, Z95 Wells Track Water, and Z96 Wells Track Sewer. If there are no specific comments or questions about these funds from the board, I will move forward.
Okay, Supervisor Crocker.
Yeah, just in this, I don't have any issue necessarily with anything in there, except I think it's important that we note as an objective that for our zones of benefit, that we're looking at opportunities to get safe and affordable drinking water, and funds specifically for that, because I know you listed it looking in the future, how that continues to be an issue from a budgetary standpoint. We advocated for the creation of that fund for numerous years, and I think that these water systems have a great opportunity to try and receive some of those funds and help out our budget.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you, Supervisor Crocker. That's good points. We'll now move on to internal service funds. Internal service funds are used to account for goods or services provided by one department or agency to another department or agency. These funds operate on a cost reimbursement basis. The internal service funds include the following: General Services Agency copier services, custodial services, facilities, fleet services, ground services, mail services, print services, and utilities. County Council risk management, general liability, medical malpractice, property insurance, workers' compensation, information and communications technologies, communications, and information and communications technology. If there are no specific comments or questions about these funds from the board, I will move forward.
Any questions or comments? Okay, continue on.
Aviation, building debt service. These are operating funds and are the core funds that provide services within the county. The operating funds include the following: aviation, building debt service, capital projects, child support services, community development block grants, county fire, fish and wildlife, health realignment, home program, housing successor agency, ICT special projects, indigent health care, library, mental health realignment, pension obligation bond, road fund, social services realignment, tobacco settlement, and the Workforce Investment Board. If there are no specific comments or questions about these funds from the board, I will move forward.
Any questions or comments? Okay, please continue.
Thank you. Moving on to our final group of budgets, which comprises the general fund budget. The general fund budget includes the following: Agricultural Commissioner, Sealer of Weights and Measures, Assessor Clerk Recorder, Auditor Controller Tax Collector, Board of Supervisors, Capital Acquisitions, Central Telephone Services, Citizens Option for Public Safety, Cooperative Extension, County Administration, County Council, District Attorney, General Services Agency, Health and Human Services Agency, Human Resources and Development, Juvenile Justice Crime Prevention Act, Miscellaneous Admin, Miscellaneous Criminal Justice, Probation, Public Defender, Purchasing, Registrar of Voters, Resource Management Agency, Rural Crime Prevention, and the Sheriff Coroner. If there are no specific comments or questions about this fund from the board, I will move forward.
Any questions? Okay, continue, please.
We'll now move on to the general revenue funds. The general revenue budget makes up the bulk of the county's discretionary revenue. The general revenue funds are general revenues listed in the budget book pages 128 and 29, and also contingency and others as needed listed on pages 133 to 134. If there are no specific questions or comments about this budget, I will move forward, and I do want to note that contingency is recommended to be at 4 million or modified, as modified by your board.
Questions or comments? Okay, please carry on.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, the final action requested today is to adopt the fiscal year 2021 final budgets for all funds and activities as modified during the hearings for the Enterprise and Assessment District funds, County Service Areas 1 and 2, Special Districts, Internal Service Funds, Operating Funds, and the General Fund. Also to amend the personnel class specification, class designations, and compensation changes subject to meet and confer. Amend the position allocation list reflecting adds, deletes, amends, and reclassifications subject to meet and confer. Approve the capital asset list. Approve a 2% cost of living increase for the following county elected officials: Sheriff Coroner, District Attorney, County Assessor, Clerk Recorder, and Auditor, Controller, Treasurer, Tax Collector, consistent with the April 30th, 2019 Resolution 2019-0287. Also approve the Board of Supervisors cost of living increase of 2%, consistent with the April 30th, 2019 Resolution 2019-0287 action, and pursuant to Tulare County Ordinance Code number 3558, which effective with the start of the first full pay period following 60 days after the adoption of the annual budget, per Ordinance Code Section 1-07-1060E. I do just want to pause here and make a comment that these 2% cost of living increases for the Board of Supervisors and for the county elected officials are the same 2% cost of living increases that we gave to the rest of the staff based on memorandums of understanding negotiated with our labor unions that took effect in July. But because of the county's ordinance, these have to wait until the adoption of the budget.
And this action was actually taken back in 2019. This is the second year of a 2-year agreement.
That's correct. Thank you for that clarification. And also then to authorize the auditor controller to make necessary minor adjustments in order to bring the fiscal year 2021 budget into final balance.
Okay, that was a lengthy presentation. At this time, are there any public comments related to the presentation? Okay, seeing none, I will bring it back to the
Chair,
board.
we do have phone
Okay,
comments.
we do have one
Phone comments.
phone comment, okay.
Good morning. Thank you for holding. You're now connected to the board meeting. Please state your name and address for the record. Your 3 minutes will begin now.
Hi, good morning, Tulare Supervisors. 24 minutes of morning left. My name is Pedro Hernandez. I'm calling from Fresno, California, and I'm the Climate Engagement Program Manager with Audubon, California. I'm also a member of the Tulare County SB 1000 Environmental Justice Element Update Advisory Committee. And so I'm here today to speak a little bit on the need for adequate funding moving forward into the new year to ensure that Tulare County, and specifically the Resource Management Agency, is adequately resourced to ensure the public process needed to complete this timely and much needed general plan update to address many of the remaining policy gaps that need to be addressed in the Tulare County General Plan to continue to address issues like climate change and overall environmental injustices in disadvantaged communities. It's no secret that these issues exist in every supervisor's district. But what I can say as someone who's worked successfully with Tulare County and with the Resource Management Agency on grant applications and local planning efforts is that if we can adequately fund this process and ensure that the public process can be robust even with the COVID considerations that we all need to consider, that this will create an integral policy framework that will contribute to not only funds invested in Tulare County, but also overcoming some of the larger historical issues that the county has faced. And so I just urge supervisors to not approve the budget without adequate funding to the environmental justice element process. Thank you.
Additional comments, Madam Clerk?
It looks like they hung up.
And was that the last comment?
Yes, it was.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. I will now close the public hearing and bring it back to the board for discussion and action. Supervisor Crocker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate staff's hard work in putting together a budget. I know that all departments, they take a significant amount of time and effort to put this together, and considering the challenges with COVID and all the other things that are going on, I think it's a tremendous effort, and just want to acknowledge our departments for doing that. Specifically, I want to thank all departments for evaluating their goals from the last fiscal year and creating new goals for this fiscal year. I think that's an extremely important element of the budget, where we get to see what these dollars and cents are actually putting to use, and what the vision is for each of the departments. And it's extremely helpful from a policy standpoint to see the direction that we're going, outside of all the other informal interactions and formal board presentations that we get on a regular basis. I also want to thank our CAO and his staff for continuing to increase our transparency in the budget process by providing the budget even further in advance than what we have, what is legally required. I think, again, those are key elements that from not only our standpoint here, but from the public standpoint, it gives a greater opportunity to provide input, and I appreciate just taking into consideration some of the comments that we've made in the past from the dais. There's some great things that I like to highlight, just a few of those. I think the heavy emphasis on technology increases our county efficiency, and I think that's really an important thing as we continue to be lean in these unknown times, but still be able to provide the county services that we know that our constituents demand. Deleting chronically vacant positions is also a great practice to increase budget transparency, and I think it's something that is very helpful to recognize where actual costs are. And then I really think that, and granted, these budgets they start essentially right after mid-year. So they've already been working on for months and months in advance, but just the foresight to make investments in our fire department, recognizing that we already have a financial challenge, hence why we're dipping into our strategic reserves, but still recognizing the importance of making additional investments to our fire department. We're seeing right now that the foresight of staff to be able to place those in months ago, how necessary they are. And I would go a step further that just what we're seeing today just emphasizes an even additional investment is needed and required, where we had that discussion not too long ago at a board meeting, at a future board meeting, we need to continue to press forward and look for additional options to make sure that our communities are safe with additional staffing and upgrading equipment. So again, I think that it's a very large document. It's I think there's a lot of great stuff. There's a few stuff that might make us second guess a little bit, but I think overall it's a large document that takes a huge amount of effort from all of our departments and many staff. So I appreciate that. One question for our CAO is, as it relates to the hiring freeze, when are we anticipating, and you kind of mentioned this, reevaluating that? Or is that going to be during this fiscal year, or is that something that we will reevaluate after the end of the fiscal year?
Thank you, Supervisor. I think our plan, we're sort of constantly reevaluating as we go through the year, but I think we'll probably formally reevaluate at mid-year, because mid-year will probably give us a good indication of where our revenues are going to come in through last, April, May, June, July. And so we'll probably do a more formal sort of review of whether we lift that freeze or not at the mid-year process.
Thank you. That's all my comments.
Okay, Supervisor Townsend.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, CAO Britt, for the great presentation and all of your hard work and your staff's work on this, especially with all the other things that are going on. We really do appreciate that. And also the department heads that have worked through and done what they can do with the budgeting to project what's going to be happening in this upcoming year. Really appreciate the fiscal conservatism on getting the balances built up, and it's just good to see that what the board did years and years and years ago is continuing and even increasing now. So that's a great thing. And I also want to echo what Supervisor Crocker mentioned about the investments in fire, and I would add Sheriff's Department to that. So public safety investments, very important, and so appreciate that. A couple of very quick questions. On the fire, Chief Norman mentioned there were at 27 million, pushing, probably anticipating 40 million. Where do we get that? Is that how do we backfill that? Is that something we go partially to the federal government for, or?
So I think the cost estimate is for, that particular cost estimate I think is for the event.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure, there typically is like a wrangling at the end as to who pays what. Since this has mostly been a national forest sort of issue, they'll probably pay the bulk of that. But yes, in normal declared disasters, there's a lot of process and sort of intricacies, but in general, we would get disaster funding either through FMAG or CDAA or a number of, we would cobble together a number of funding sources to help offset those costs. At the end of the day, any matches to those assistance grants or anything like that would come out of either contingency or the department's budget, or we would use that from our emergencies sub fund that we talked about for $1 million. That would be how we pay for those matches if there were any.
Okay, very good, thank you. And then the other one is just on the 178 million revenue projection. That does not include the 48.9 from CARES Act, is that right? Yeah, thank you.
That's just discretionary funding that the board has discretion over.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, Supervisor Joaquin.
Yeah, I just want to thank the CAO and his staff. I know I'm in the office a lot while they're working on this, and tensions are high, but they handle it well. So I appreciate all the hard work that goes into it. The transparency especially. I know our CAO has had media days and offered for the media to come in and go over the budget. I just want to share that I received an email yesterday from a constituent that said, I read the Tulare County budget this morning. I was impressed. The budget format makes it easy to see what the county is spending on each area, the numbers of people employed in each area by job classification, and how much each person, much people in each position make. I had a question, and I found my answer. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, Supervisor Crocker.
Thank you. Just the incident costs are for all agencies on Sequoia Complex, so I'm not sure what our exact cost would be, but the 27 million includes everybody else's, and I think that's something that as we get over the fire and hopefully that's sooner rather than later, that's something that we add to an advocacy to advocate specifically for full cost recovery, because I know that there are certain grants and reimbursements that don't offer that, and recognizing that this is something of a magnitude that brought our president out to California, and that there's a lot of emphasis with fire everywhere, that this is something that should be, we should receive grants, and I would be in favor of moving in that direction at a later date.
All right, Supervisor Valero.
All right. Well, thank you to our county staff for putting this together. I know it's a long and arduous process, but yes, thank you. And yes, I know that there is more that we can do to reflect the needs of Tulare County, but I do believe that we are getting there, and this budget reflects that. I also want to echo Crocker's push for staff really to look into matters reflected on pages 30 and 31 with regards to our sewer and other opportunities with clean water. And so we have to just be ahead of the game on that. But nonetheless, like I say, the investments in our unincorporated communities are those that we really need to look into an investment, and we are doing just that day in and day out. So again, I do want to commend our staff for putting this together, and I always enjoy the fact that our staff is always looking ahead at how our county will continue to thrive and strive under pressure and under circumstances that are often beyond our control. So thank you, staff, for doing so.
All right, that concludes board comments, and I just want to add on to that real quick that I do just appreciate this budget adhering to the general philosophy that has been adhered to over the years. We are very aggressive in assuming revenues and making sure that those are not overstated. But if we are going to overstate anything, we do overstate expenses, and I think that it's important to be conservative with revenue estimates and aggressive on the expense side, because we know those costs can go up during the year. Appreciate all the work that the CAO and various department heads have done. This really is a team effort and reflects all aspects of Tulare County coming to the table to put together a budget and labor agreements, everything that's included here that are fiscally sustainable and move this county in a positive direction. So I am proud to support this budget as it has been presented and look forward to its implementation over this coming year. With that being said, I will now bring the item to a vote and entertain a motion. I have a motion from Supervisor Townsend. We have a second from Supervisor Joaquin. Please vote. Motion passes 5-0 unanimously. This budget hearing is now concluded. Thank you, everyone, all of our departments who have attended today's presentation. We will now move on to another item of departmental interest, and that is the consent calendar. Take up items 5 through 38. I know that on item 7, we do need to correct and make sure that the fiscal year actually stated is for fiscal year 2020, 2021, not fiscal year 19 and 20, as the agenda item indicates. And then item 16 has some public comment requests, and I will remove that, and we will consider that separately. Are there any additional comments by members of the board or items to be pulled or corrected, members of the public or board?
Okay.
Supervisor Valero?
Yes, and this is just a comment on item 11, which is to approve sending a letter supporting the consolidation of the East Orosi Community Service District and the Orosi Public Utilities District water systems. And just want to shout out to Denise England, our water director, who has been working really hard on this. And I know we've been on several calls making sure that we're continuing to work with the state on a long pressing issue that has not really come to completeness. And we've been dealing with this for many years, and that is making sure that we have safe and clean drinking water for our East Orosi community. Thank you, Denise.
Okay. Any additional items or comments? If not, the chair will entertain a motion for the balance of the consent calendar, last item 16.
Move approval for the balance.
We have a
minus
motion by
item
Supervisor
16.
Joaquin, second by Supervisor Valero. Please vote. Unanimously. On item 16, I do have numerous public comment requests, and I don't believe we need a departmental presentation, but I will call forward the public comment request at this time. That's I have one request from Elnan Waitala. Okay. All right, so she's removed, and then I have a request from Marty Ferguson. Okay. That's typically not done, but thank you for putting this on here. I appreciate it, and I'm taking in consideration the comments. Joyce Ream Ferguson, you're next. Okay. It's got 3 requests to remove the item from board vote. Any questions or comments from board members? Supervisor Townsend?
Yeah. What is the time period for us to reaffirm? When do we need to do this?
So generally, this would be done every 14 days, but under the governor's new order, the need for renewal has technically been suspended.
So we don't, did you say we don't need to renew it? Normally it's 14 days, but right
Normally,
now
it's
we don't.
every 14 days, but we don't technically need to renew it under the governor's executive order that suspended the requirement to renew any emergency proclamations.
Okay. I have some other things that I was going to bring up at the very end, which I will, that could affect this. So if we don't need to take action on it now, I would be supportive of not taking action right now.
Okay. Any additional comments from board members? This is on item 16.
Yeah, and I'll move the table if that's the appropriate thing
Sorry.
to do.
Jeff will please
Go ahead,
clarify.
Yeah.
Jeff Kuia, Chief Deputy County Counsel. In general, the governor's orders did suspend the requirement for periodically renewing the declaration of emergency relative to COVID-19. However, the order did not include the provisions under which we're allowed to go out and do sole source purchasing for this public work project, which is what's the subject of this agenda item. Recall that 2 weeks ago, General Services brought to you a request to skip the bidding and the preparation of plans and specifications for the touchless restroom projects that's being paid with CARES Act money. That was done under a specific provision of the Public Contract Code that allows in emergency situations, and in our reading, the situation with COVID-19 and the CARES Act money qualifies, but it's specific to the Public Contract Code and not the general emergency provisions that the governor suspended. So our recommendation to General Services was to be safe, we ought to bring this back every 2 weeks until the project is completed. Recall that the completion date has to be done by the end of the year in order to expend all of the funds that have been allocated for that. So that's why this is before you again. It doesn't add to anything that's been previously done. It's simply to make sure that we're in, to the extent we can be in compliance with the public contract code requirements.
Okay, great. Thank you for that clarification.
Mr. Chair, and so.
Sorry for the confusion.
If I might. And so the money that we're talking about, Jeff, is the CARES Act funds that we haven't received yet?
It's the ones that are part of the plan that you approved, I believe last.
Yeah. We approved the
ago.
expenses. Dennis is making a point that the revenues haven't necessarily been received
Yeah,
yet for this project.
Yeah,
16.2 million of the
yeah, the
48.9.
CAO would have to speak to that. I don't know what's come in at this point. But.
You know, I would like to see us maybe discuss this more, whether it's in part of our COVID discussions in closed session or whether we have a full presentation on how we need to act here. I would like to see us table it for now until we can find out more information.
Okay, and I do apologize. I do have a request from Pam Silva to speak on this as well, so I want to give Pam a chance to comment.
Okay, as I stated earlier, I do have a problem with the emergency being declared as it has been by our public health officer. I would like to see that change to reflect the county ordinance. Let me bring it up here real quick. That is 115-1033. Is it E? Yes. In order for isolation or quarantine shall be personally served. And and again, we have the 60 days. And I've already given you the Health and Human Services, what a quarantine means. It means you're restricting the people from going to schools or whatever it is. It is still a restriction, and it's still a quarantine. That's the hill I'm going to die on. And the 60 days is passed. So there needs to be another order. It needs to be amended to reflect our constitutional rights that I've also stated earlier in my public comment. I find it appalling that the public health officer would use, saying if I didn't wear this, would use the law of a public nuisance, because there is no law, there is no ordinance, I should say. There is no ordinance giving her the ability to fine me or arrest me for not wearing a mask. So I would like to see that amended to where we aren't criminals simply for carrying on our normal everyday life. How do you quarantine somebody who is not sick? You do by saying that they don't have symptoms yet. Well, that is a quarantine in its most simplest form. You're saying they're sick or they might be sick, you're making them wear a mask, the kids can't go to school. That is a violation of my civil rights and everybody else in this county. And I'd like to see this order written to where it's no longer a violation or an unlawful order. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any additional public comments? Okay, seeing none, I will close public comments and bring it back to the board. Supervisor Valero, I have a request to speak from you.
Yes. So I will just tend to disagree with my colleague, and I think that personally we just need to let our General Services Agency do its job. I think that we may be overarching in terms of how we go about our business with this matter. And so I just think that I want to give that onus and that responsibility to our departments to make that decision. And they have come to us with this consent item to be able to say, look, we need to move this forward. And the moment that we begin to nitpick what can and cannot our departments do with regards to this matter is something that we set precedent for the future. So again, I am ready to vote on this, but if my colleagues choose not to, well then, okay.
All right. Supervisor Crocker?
Yeah, so for clarification, we can, there's no penalty if we come back next week with this item and discuss it. We can ratify the action later on, or we can figure out something where a week isn't going to kill the actions.
Right, so you can come back next week and re-proclaim the presence of the emergency, which you had done in the past, in order to bypass these public contract code sections, these specific sections which allow you to sole source outside of the normal bidding process, which would expedite a lot of these projects to use the CARES money.
And we do have to reaffirm the emergency in order to utilize sole sourcing procurement.
In order to engage the emergency provisions under the Public Contracts Code, yes.
Hello.
But we can utilize sole sourcing even out by making some local declaration even outside of COVID.
So I just wanted to let the board know, Brooke Sisk, General Services Agency Assistant Director, we intend to have a contract presented to you on October 6th, potentially October 13th at the latest. So County Council may be able to answer that, but we may need to just have this resolved by that time.
Supervisor Joaquin?
Yeah, I would not be in favor of tabling this. I mean, we're talking about sole sourcing to expedite. We've heard all along that these CARES Act money are coming to us and we have to spend them by the end of the year. And I'm just not in favor of tabling this to make it, whether it's a political statement or anything. We just need to move forward so that General Services can start, with their contracts and ordering the things that we need to do.
All right, Supervisor Townsend?
Yeah, just to reiterate, and I think Supervisor Crocker touched on it too, that I think that we could get a little bit more information and discuss it a little bit further. And I think waiting for a week or so to do that so that we'd have the time to discuss, because there's other things that are going to be brought up that will affect this. And what we're doing is reaffirming the presence of COVID-19 and resulting infections, illnesses, blah, 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 that constitute an emergency. And if we don't need to do that right now, since that's been suspended, we don't need to take that action right now. So I'd like to talk about all the implications of that, and we could do it next week, and we can get more information together and discuss it next week, or do even a closed session workshop on it if we need to. But I would again move to table it until at least next week.
Okay, so that's a formal motion. Let me make some comments real quick before we get to a formal motion. So my reading of this is that it's a request from General Services to basically provide the foundation that we need to waive the public contract code, or to operate within a provision of the code, allowing us to sole source so that we can expedite contracts and expedite the expenditure of funds so that we can actually get these construction projects done prior to year end. This is not basically saying that we agree with what the governor has done or with what the public health officer has done. This is just giving us an opportunity within the public contracting code to move forward with these projects so that we can get this get these contracts issued. I understand that we can, we're planning to bring them back in October. That's fine, but I just think that we need to move forward expeditiously and not unnecessarily delay this at this time, and in the interest of getting this done and making sure these monies are spent. I will be supportive of that idea. Supervisor Townsend?
Yeah, just Chairman, just to reply to that, we already gave authorization to do sole sourcing at a previous meeting. That's been mentioned, I think, twice as we've been discussing this, and it's been told us that we do not have to reaffirm the local emergency in order to do that. So they already have authority to sole source.
Okay, thank you. The chair will now open for motions and votes. Open the floor.
I think Supervisor Townsend made a
Okay,
motion
Supervisor
earlier.
Townsend made a motion to table this item. We have a second by Supervisor Crocker. Please vote. Motion does not pass on a 2-3 vote. Supervisors Crocker and Townsend voting for, myself, Supervisor Shuckley, and Supervisor Valero voting no. Chair will open the floor for an alternative motion.
Mr. Chair, I would move that we approve item 16 as presented.
Okay, we have a motion by Supervisor Shuckley. Second by Supervisor Valero. Please vote. Motion does pass 3-2. Supervisor Vanderpool, Shuckley, and Valero voting for, and Crocker and Townsend voting against. Motion passes. We will now move on to the untimed portion of our meeting agenda and take up item number 39. It's a request from the Auditor Controller to approve the rate of taxation of the State of California for fiscal year 2020-2021 to be collected upon the taxable property of the County of Tulare, State of California, at the rate of $1 per $100 of assessed valuation. Paul.
Good afternoon. Chairman Pete Vanderpool, board members, CEO Jason Britt, County Council. This is the time fixed by law for levying the rate of taxation for the state and county purposes for fiscal year 2021. We're recommending to this board to approve the rate of taxation of the state and county for the fiscal year to be collected upon the taxable property of the County of Tulare at the rate of $1 per $100 of assessed valuation, as shown on the attached schedule and allowed by law. We're further recommending that this board order the tax rates as shown on the attached schedules A, which is the unitary, which is the railroads, B, which includes the bonds, and C, which is the special districts who have sent it in, of which there are 5. And that is to raising of the necessary amount to pay the principal and interest on the bonds for the special purpose and of the said districts as allowed by law. Just go over just a couple quick highlights. These rates have been approved by I'm speaking of the bonds now, the rates have been approved by the voters of the County of Tulare through past ballot measures. And this year we had 4 new bond issues. They were for Joaquin Elementary, Visalia Unified, Lindsay Unified, and Three Rivers Elementary. There were 2 bonds that were refinanced to allow for a reduced rate, and I might make a plug, this is probably the time to do it if you're a school or a district. Those were Lindsay Unified and College of the Sequoias for the Visalia area. Also, point of good news, Tulare Healthcare District also refinanced and with a pretty tremendous savings for the taxpayer for this year. So that's down from 0.1 to 0.05, so about a half, about reducing half. So their tax rate is going to go down this year if you approve it. For your information, we've included Schedule D. Those are the ones that are approved by other boards of supervisors that intersect with their county. And we further recommend, finally, that this board approve and accept the statement of valuation of the property in this county as compiled by the auditor in accordance with Government Code 25254. And finally, last year's current tax rolls after all the taxes were extended, which you're going to do today, totaled at about $498 million, and that was on $38.2 billion in assessed value. And this year's assessed value is at $40.3 billion when you include the unitary, and so I mean the estimate would be well over $500 million in taxable dollars. So, and with that, would you please approve these tax rates and valuation? And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Any questions or comments by board members, members of the public? All right, seeing none, Chair will entertain a motion. We have a motion by Supervisor Townsend, a second by Supervisor Valero. Please vote. Motion passes 5-0 unanimous. We will now move on our agenda to take up item 40, which is a request from the Resource Management Agency to adopt written findings in support of the board's tentative decision to deny the Wonderful Company's appeal of the Resource Management Agency's issuance of building permits number A200938 and A2001028 for Aero Pistachios, Inc.
Thank you, Chairman Vanderpool, Supervisors, CAO, Council. I am Aaron Bach, Assistant Director with the Resource Management Agency. And today before you, as per your request, findings in support of the board's decision to tentatively deny the appeal by the Wonderful Company. I've been asked to go through and put in the record our findings. These findings are based on the Resource Management Agency staff provided the board with factual presentation regarding the background of the Wonderful Company's appeal of RMA's issuance of the building permits that were previously stated for Aero Pistachio Incorporated. Wonderful presented their case in chief, alleging violations of the county zoning ordinance, CEQA, and inconsistencies with the building permits and the permitted uses on the site. ARO presented their case in chief, arguing the issuance of the building permits aligned properly with the county zoning code and CEQA. The permits were consistent with the existing use permits. The building permits were consistent with the existing use permits, modification, CEQA, and the currently approved building permits and current construction that is occurring on site. After receiving the testimony from staff, both parties, and the public, the board closed the evidentiary hearing to deliberate the evidence. The board ultimately issued a tentative decision to deny the wonderful company's appeal, directing staff to prepare written findings for the board's consideration on September 15th. Before the board today is a brief overview of the staff's findings in support of its tentative decision. Finding number 1. The land use approvals for the ARO facility were issued in accordance with the applicable land use and zoning regulations, the California Environmental Quality Act, and all applicable standards, policies, and practices of Tulare County, and they do remain valid. The special use permit remains valid as there are no RMA records, and ARO testified as to the site never being discontinued for its permitted use. Minor modifications do not substantially change the use. There were not conditions of approval that limited the site's use to 10 employees, that the use permit applied to the site's use and the use was not changed by modifications to the site, and any challenges to the minor modifications, the latest being in 2018, are timely barred by 90-day statute of limitations. County complied with CEQA, including a negative declaration and subsequent notices of exemption in compliance with the negative declaration. Finding 2, the board denies the appeal because building permits A2000938 and A2001028 are consistent with the land use approvals for the ARO plant. Minor modification 15-006 authorized the installation of 8 pistachio dryers. These are depicted in the approval site plan for MIM 15-006. Nevertheless, dryers are considered an accessory function of pistachio processing, and incidental and accessory structures and equipment do not require independent land use approvals. Minor modifications authorize all the minor modifications, and the use permit itself authorize a total of 20 pistachio dryers. 4 dryers are authorized under MIM 17-034. These have been built, and 4 more are under construction, so in line with the 20 pistachio dryers approved for this project. Pre-cleaners and wet haulers are equipment which are allowed by right within the AE40 zone. Finding 3, the board denies the appeal because the location of silos and storage facilities on property lines are consistent with land use approvals and county practices. The land use approvals are effective as to both parcels. The ARO plant is owned and operated by the Arandi family, and the 2 parcels are owned by members of the Arandi family and comprise the ARO plant site. The decision on PSP 96-074 was subsequently recorded against the entire 78.48 acre parcel, and the retired APN number 319-13-019, which was duly recorded and remains recorded against the full 78.48 acres. Agricultural processing applications that have buildings, structures, operations, or equipment that cross property line setbacks are not applicable due to family or company partners' ownership of both properties. The county has always allowed deviations from the original site plan and agricultural setbacks for building permits through plan check processes as long as they are reasonable. Staff looks at joint users under one use as within the quote-unquote yard area under the setback rules of the county. Finding 4, there is no evidence that the ARO plant is a nuisance. The ARO plant is protected by the Right to Farm Act. Finding 5, the board denies the appeal because the issuance of building permits did not violate CEQA. The county prepared a negative declaration for PSP 96-074 in 1996. Each subsequent minor modification was accompanied with a duly published notice of exemption. No additional environmental impacts have been identified or reviewed. The expansion was not improperly piecemealed. It was all done concurrently with the original plan and intent of the project. Finally, the board denies the appeal because the appellant has abandoned any additional claims. In its letter initiating the appeal, appellant made several claims that are not abandoned, including inter alia that the approval of MIM 17-034 and the building permits violated Government Code Section 51238-1, that the clearing necessary for the improvements authorized by the minor modifications was not authorized, and that the privacy fence was not authorized. The board hereby finds that these and any other claims appellant failed to advance through its briefing and failed to bring before the board at the August 25th, 2020 hearing are abandoned and are therefore denied. That completes staff's presentations of the finding. I would like to enter into the evidence a letter by Latham and Watkins, kind of last minutes, one paragraph, stating that all their previous arguments are the same today.
Okay.
Again, that completes the staff's presentations of the findings. If there's any questions, I'm here to answer those.
Any questions or comments from board members? Members of the public on this item? Please come forward, state your name and address for the record.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Jeff Roberts. I work for the ASIMI Group, 1396 West Herndon Avenue in the city of Fresno. I'm going to be extremely brief. We want to state for the record, we are involved with the Aero plant, and we were here at the last meeting on August 25th. I want to state for the record, we concur completely with the staff's recommendation here today, with their very complete and clear findings that they made. And we'd be happy to answer any questions, but because of the hour, we'll be very brief. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any questions? All right, thank you for being here, Jeff.
Thank you.
All right, seeing there are no questions, no public comments, in addition, we will, any phone comments, Madam Clerk? Okay, we will now take this item up for a vote. We have a motion by Crocker, second by Shucklian. Please vote. Motion passes 5-0 unanimous. Thanks for the presentation, Aaron. We're now going to take up item 41. During this item, board members may make a referral to staff to have a matter of business considered for a future agenda item. Are there any such requests? Supervisor Crocker?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, and thinking about what's going on up the hill and up the mountain, I think that one item for us to consider as far as we're advocating for policy changes is that having a change to our legislative platform that we add on changes to how fire suppression occurs on national lands, on public lands, where locally we can take action, get full reimbursement to tackle wildland fires. And I think if we, granted, I think this will need to be worked out a little bit, but if there are wildfires under a certain size, like 1,000 acres or something, where we can be proactive, or at least, or it's really not proactive, but be able to take some action before it gets to this devastating level. We've seen and we know that the Forest Service policy is a hands-off policy at the beginning, and when we're seeing the devastating effects of that. And so if there was a policy change that could happen with the Forest Service to allow for us to do that, recoup our costs, recognizing that they don't always have all the personnel, but we can try and prevent some of these events from getting to a catastrophic level, I think I would be strongly in favor of adding that to our platform.
Okay, thank you. Supervisor Townsend?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to add to our upcoming agenda that we would begin to discuss our future in light of the governor's tiered system for reopening of the economy. We had talked about a little bit the last time we got together how there is no green on that graph, on that chart. There is no full reopening, and I went through and just estimated that we were probably looking at somewhere in December to be at yellow if everything went perfectly. We were moving in the right direction, but I think we're probably mid-December if it all went perfectly. Then, as we're hearing this morning from our HHSA director about the new things that we're going to be hearing probably today for equity, where we're now going to have another metric that we're going to need to adjust, or another hoop that we'll need to jump through. And then the adjustments themselves for testing that we've been back and forth on, even though, again, everybody's been doing yeoman's work on testing. I'd like us to start considering options of what it will take to regain local control of Tulare County, taking back local control to put it back in the hands of elected officials in the county, making decisions based on input from our own departments, and also taking into account the state and federal agencies, but that we could potentially revise tiers as needed. We've been getting some help from our federal partners on trying to get a hold of the monies that are still owed to us, that are CARES Act monies that the state is holding. Hopefully an audit will be ensuing before long. And I think that we should get that off the table, that we should start talking about as a group what we'd like to do, whether it's stay that exact course or do something different. So if we could put that on as an item of consideration, upcoming meeting.
Thank you for that request. Any additional requests? Seeing none, I'll look over to council. Do we have need for closed session?
Yes, we do have need for closed session. Items A, B, C, E, and F are off calendar. We will hear the balance of the agenda in closed session, and there may be an announcement out.
Okay. Thank you for attending today's meeting. Stay healthy and safe. Meeting adjourned to closed session. There may be an announcement out.
What? Oh, is anybody coming? I think so. Okay. Mel, we're waiting just 1 minute. I want to wait just 1 minute because we. Ready? This is Deanne Peterson, County Counsel, reporting out on closed session item I. The Board of Supervisors took action in a personnel matter to appoint Jennifer Mendoza Flores to the position of County Counsel. This is a 4-year term beginning 10/11 of 2020. This is a roll call vote on the motion of Supervisor Shucklian, second by Dennis Townsend. It was a 5-0 unanimous vote. This concludes the reporting out for today.